I'm looking at my minutes from last meeting going, May, I'm not in May. Apologies. Just a quick karakia first. Whaia te mātauranga kia marama, kia whai take i ngā mahi, kia tū, kia kaha, rāheri atu, rāheri mai, tātou ki tātou katoa, te hei Māori ora. Which actually is, in English, seek knowledge for understanding, have purpose in the things we do, stand tall, be strong, and let us show respect for each other. It is life. It sets the tone for us this morning. We have a really busy and important day. So there's a couple of things I just want to cover off, but before I launch into that, I would like us just to take a moment to acknowledge the passing of Brother Thompson and send our araha to Gail and family. Very sad for us all. Okay. We, as I say, have quite a big day, and we have some submitters to hear, which is fantastic. We always like to hear from people. But my expectations are that all of the items that we have to cover off today deserve our equal attention. So although we might be getting to a later in the day than usual, we need to fully apply ourselves all day. I will do my best, depending on how much coffee I might have had. One of the keys to that, though, is going to be me having to be fairly tight on the fact that you should be asking questions. Depending on how things are going, making a statement, a lengthy statement, is not going to be appropriate today. So please restrict yourselves to questions as much as you possibly can, or I might have to growl. That would be terrible. That's generally for the whole day, but specifically for item 9.1, it's my expectation that we will do that in 3 parts. We have to move some recommendations, and then we will hear the submitters, and then we will deliberate and then move a final recommendation, unless there are specific changes or outcomes from the submitters that but generally speaking, that will happen in 3 parts. Okay. So, any questions on any of that procedural stuff? No, great. Right, we will tick through the apologies. We have an apology from Councillor Gibson and an apology from Councillor Guyton.
And also Councillor Roy and Stuart Bull and Anne Wakefield.
And Peter McDonald.
Peter's here.
I was online.
So we've got Councillor Roy and
Peter rang last night to say he's got COVID, but yes, he is going to be online. Sorry, Peter. Yeah.
Yes, welcome, Peter. And Stuart Bull and Anne Wakefield. So that's 5. Somebody like to move those, please? Thank you, Chairman Horrell, seconded Councillor McPhail. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried, thank you. Confirmation of the minutes of, declarations of interest.
Just to note that one of the submitters comments on the groundwater program that that the council has, and just to note that my son Ewan is in the science team. And I do have a couple of questions on that particular submission, but any voting on that submission, I would refrain from.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McPhail.
Yeah, I'd just like to know that I do own consents, and we're obviously discussing those previously things. I do read consents. I'm not sure that's no.
Anybody else? Councillor Pemberton.
Same as Jeremy, your consents.
Great, thank you for that. It's very important that we're mindful of those, and thanks for mentioning them, raising them. Item 4 is public forum petitions and deputations. We don't have any of those today. We have enough. So item 5 is confirmation of minutes from the 10th of May. So would you like to move those?
I move
Please?
those.
Thanks, Councillor McPhail, seconded Councillor Evans.
We have an amendment, please. I was present.
You were present.
Moved and seconded some motions.
Good as gold. We can make that amendment. Any other items from the minutes that need discussion or change? Right, so with that amendment, I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried, thank you. I've had no notification of extraordinary or urgent business, nor any questions. I
did send a question through to you on the 20th of June.
Oh,
4:35
sorry.
to everybody. If I could just
Yep.
explain. briefly, that's right.
Yep.
It was in relation to the minutes which record of the last meeting, which recorded it's to do with estuary monitoring. And I asked whether other matters could be included in the estuary monitoring program, such as monitoring wildlife and other species of animals and fish. I see that the minutes record that it was Wilson advised that a 10-year science plan was being developed that would include points such as climate implications and additional monitoring needs. And I just wondered whether that did include that or not.
Yeah, the short answer is yes, it does include that. It includes it in two ways. One, in terms of the monitoring that we're looking at doing, and secondly, we're also looking at developing a reporting framework. Also looking at how we're reporting on our information as well. So yes, it is very much being considered.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam
Thanks,
Chair.
Karen. Thanks, Morris. Sorry about that. Right, thank you. That moves us to item 9 and item 9.1, really. Oh, sorry, Chairman and Councillors report, sorry. Thanks, Councillor.
We're all caught on a number of meetings that I've been involved with. Along with a number of others that seem to be being able to the power of making gas. Last week, following the first one, actually, we had to have a flat to look at what was there. And one of the things that struck me was the quite significant regeneration of native bush coming out in core spaces. The only probably attributed to the Osprey program, almost 20 years ago, that really low flooding numbers, but it's quite encouraging to actually see the amount of regrowth going on there. I also attended the ACE meeting at Riverton, which was the sort of the final in this phase of the project, the funding of the last 3 years. Obviously, it won't be the Riverton catchment group, but you know, very good to be there, and just so I'd like to acknowledge the work that team has put on over the last year. It actually was set up well for certified farm plans and plant transport here. And also, briefly, is at the business innovation hub opening last night with Rachel, which is a very nice facility for make use of.
Thanks, Chairman. Any other reports? Thanks.
This was in the same email that was sent to everybody. So, I won't read the whole thing out, but it was in relation to the reimagining the Tower Hui held in Gore last week. And I thought it was very good. I know we have subsequently received an email from Louise Dennison about this, asking us for further input. So that's very positive. Yeah, it's a very good day, very well supported by a whole range of different people, to be able to predict some of this that issue were, Madam Chair. one of the things that's been a favourite of my favourite sort of long-term goal of mine was to somehow restore the Tower Falls to something like they were in the past, knowing that it's a very constricted site now with the freezer works on one side and the pavement on the other. But it does seem to me that it might be possible to talk to the owners of those companies to perhaps somehow at some stage adjust their operations to move back a little bit to make that restore what the falls to some extent of what the falls were like. They're very important cultural, Mahinga the recreational site. It has been taken over by those two buildings. So we don't want to get rid of the Bloomington Court. We want them to remain somehow, but I think there might be opportunities. I don't know if this council can do anything, but it would be good. We think facilitate that process.
Thanks, councillor. It was interesting suggestions from some around the Mataura Falls, actually, wasn't it? So thank you. Any other comments from those who went to the reimagining Mataura Day? No?
All I did say that was good to see, and I'll steal Councillor Morrison's word here that it was groups working within a catchment when we're dealing with catchment issues and isolating those groups specifically, and looking at the whole region. So that's certainly a train of thought that we're trying to look for into the future. So it was good seeing that. What I'll say.
Thanks, councillor. Okay. Any others? Fantastic. Right, this time we will move to item 9.1, which is the consideration of submissions on proposed fees and charges schedule for 2023-24. Rachel, are you going to take us through the start of that paper, or?
Yes, but perhaps invite Tania to come up as well. So essentially, as councillors are aware, we've been going through the process with both the annual plan and the fees and charges, which sit alongside but aren't specifically part of the annual plan. And on the 3rd of May, you adopted a draft document which has subsequently gone out for consultation. Tani, would you like to comment on the range of submissions that have come in?
Yes, thank you, Rachel. Overall, the submitters perhaps queried the increase in price relative to innovation. There were several things about that we made.
Sorry, excuse me, Tony, can you speak up, please?
There was several who have commented on the choice of inflation rate. And 3 or 4 who pointed out that we had incorrectly changed the word from maximum to minimum, which did make a difference. They are represented here in the attached submissions. There were several, sorry, 2 that commented on our gravel. We added the word excavated to the gravel for clarification, and there was 2 submitters on that with suggestions that they proposed. One from Mr. McGregor, we have discussed actually in catchment meetings. Yeah, it's a positive submission, and that we can't undertake that now. The reason every consent that we have is currently in cubic meters, that would require quite a substantial change of policy and methodology, but we are committed to understanding if it's something we could look at in the future. The submission from Fulton Hogan, I think they might have misinterpreted what we're saying. We're saying we're charging for gravel, not for overburden, not for scalping. We have replied to them to suggest that the uneconomic gravel that they might be leaving on the river now, with the consideration for them, if they can remove it from the river, it is actually excavated and removed. And we've replied on that basis. That is the summation of the submissions. We've amended the words and replied, and we had some committers, sorry, the Federated Farmers, of course. Had the submission that they want to speak to. And Mr. Wilson is here to speak to his submission as well.
Mr. McCallum as well.
That's the time I'm speaking to both, I think. So the annual plan and then the charge, the increase, overall increase.
Very hard to hear anyone in this room today.
Oh, it's one of those days, frosty day or something.
Aircon being on, but I'm struggling to hear Rachel and I'm struggling to hear you and your rights. And I can see members on the sitting back here not hearing people either.
Yeah, so
They need to speak.
please,
Yeah.
we'll do our best.
We have a microphone issue, we know that, so yeah, need projection today.
Peter, are you all right with the online audio? Right. Give me a wave if you need anything from Tipton. Right, thanks. Rachel, anything else?
So essentially it's recommended council resolve to go through recommendation 1A to G and agree to hear all the submitters and then move into the hearing of those submissions at this point.
Yeah, so just to make that clear, there are H number of recommendations in the paper, but we will initially move A to G, which allows us to receive the information, receive the submissions, hear the oral submissions, note the officers' reports, receive the revised work and agree to hear the submitters. So we need to do all of that before we can hear the submitters.
Happy to move in that direction with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Chairman Horrell, seconded Councillor Cook. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Right. So we'll move into the submission, hearing the submissions at this point. Mr. McCallum first. So, Mr. McCallum, welcome to the hearing of the submissions to Council's proposed fees and charges schedule. Just ensuring that you are aware that the meeting is being live streamed and that councillors have had full vision of your submissions, so they have all read that. It's up to you to highlight any points or add any extra information in your 5-minute allocation. Councillors, reminding you that we have 5 minutes for questions of clarification for the submitters. And the utmost respect from all parties will be required. Thank you. That is my preamble. Jan's got her 5-minute timer ready and waiting so that we are all fair and equitable. Thank you, Mr. McCallum. Welcome.
First of all, thank you for letting us come and make some comments to you. I've got about 4 comments I just want to draw out of my submission. But firstly, I was speaking to the Chairman Horrell last night about a Waituna matter, and he asked me a direct question, so I just want to clarify that. I have not spoken to the media. I know there's an article in the media that has been circulated 2 days ago. This is basically straight print out of my submission, and I have not spoken to the media for quite some time, and I'm talking years, not days or months. Secondly, the only reason I found this submission was on your quarterly newsletter. So I'm going to, maybe questioning you want to draw that out a bit more, but my visibility, social media, my interaction, and that sort of stuff is, I did not see it until I saw it there, and it was an extended time. The main reason I'm here today is because as a previous councillor, as many of you will be aware, we did a thorough investigation into the finances of the ES. We spent about 12 months in depth backwards and forwards, up and down, backs and forwards, outside help to help us understand the accounts, the trends, and where we were going as a council, because we had a lot of information and a lot of concerns going forward that we were. At that point, there was quite a debate, and some of you will remember that debate. Over the 3-year period, we needed to raise a certain amount of money, and that money ended up landing at 25.5. We talked about more average rate rise year after year, but we talked about quite extensively about how was the best way to achieve the goal. We had quite a bit of what I'd say is catch up to do. We had to position ourselves best as we could going forward. At that point, there was quite a debate and saying if you land on the 25.5, you need to realise that that's locked and loaded. This is a commitment to the community. This is a promise. This is a contract through the LTP that you would put in place. And I'll just make the point that right now, many of us in the private sector are doing exactly that. I do not have the ability to go to Bonterra or Lawrence and ask them for price increases. I do not have that option. I'm suggesting to you that you may need to look at how you that bill going forward. I'm aware of local government report that's come out. It is telling us the same thing. It's just in different words, but the methodology is the same. I also, when I read the report, did not see the value loop in that fees and charges. In the fees and charges, the only thing that comes back to me is the CME report, and I've only ever seen that at the council table. You need to realise that I deal with you as an individual, but you deal with me as a group. The standard deviation curve and understanding my consenting profile, my consenting compliance needs to come back to me in a meaningful manner that actually increases my ability to improve my business. I don't think that's there in that report. I can tell you about how they can also be developed. The dairy reporting I was looking for, because I'm a dairy farmer and I was looking for certainty and confidence. While the email yesterday helped to some degree, I thought it would be in the fees and charges. It wasn't there, and it's still not there in a form that I can understand what happens in the value loop back to me as a consenting client. I'm going to put a little aroma in for the government report that you sent to government to understand what the province is doing as a whole. And I'll also have asked your staff for other questions that will not be included in that report. But I think it's important that people understand those questions. In summary, I think the maximum you should be putting forward is 5%. But in view of how you've dealt with this, I'm going to suggest, because I'm able to from this position, is saying I don't think you should be putting anything forward until you have your value proposition put forward in a better way. But I do think that 3.3 should be improved. And I don't understand, and in 3.3, you go from 20,000 to 40,000. It's the section there relates to making plan changes. But going from 0.2 to 0.3 is a bullet point there. I don't understand how you get there. I understand what it says, but I don't understand how you evaluate from an individual commitment in this process to a council taking over that and being committed. I'd like clarification on it. That is the end of my comments. Thank you.
And almost on time, councillor. Thank you. Questions, councillors? Councillor Rodway and then Chairman Horrell.
Couple of things, well, thank that. I don't quite understand what when you're referring to 0.3, 0.2 and stuff like that.
0.3. It's in the changes, policy statements and plans. And then the table 2, you've got an increase. I think that should go ahead regardless of what your number is, regardless. That makes sense to me. But if you go above that, the first one is decline the request, the second one is to accept the request, And the third one is to adopt the request. I don't understand how you go from a person putting in an application process to the council picking up the costs. I don't know whether that's a council decision or how that actually flips from a concerned ratepayer to and paying for a process to the council actually picking it up from a council perspective for the region. And I expect some clarification on how that affects on my street.
You'll understand also that we're not in a position to answer that question at this very minute.
I understand that, but this is the only opportunity I've got to actually highlight things, and if you don't pick it up today, you may be able to pick it up in
Yep.
further detail going forward.
Look, one of the, you made a couple of comments that were quite concerning to me, about the way the councils is perceived by the community. Many do not want to raise these things with you because they feel they will be targeted if they do. And somebody else too, you've made it as hard as you can, looking from the outside, is a concern.
Yes, they are, but when you're standing on the side of a football field and hear conversations, you have to repeat them back to where they can be changed. That's what I'm hearing out there. See, I've looked at this from a point of view of, I'm no longer a councillor, so I do a lot of listening. And this is what I'm hearing. And I can give you examples in detail if you wanted to with those that felt targeted. I've had phone calls to me saying I won't take it any further because I don't want to upset the apple cart. So I can only pass it on.
Thank you, Councillor Roy. Chairman Hall.
Chair, well, just on that last comment, I would hope that anybody like to win the council and then we're trying to elect because you remember quite on a council which is trying to be fair, consistent, and any concerns like that, I'll certainly want to know about the organisation. That's not the culture that now what you were making before, was that narrative around the increase for somebody wanting to make a plan change? And I was wondering, that's right, we look at ourselves, that's a very weird situation, and the cost of a plan change, and so we actually did scrutinise that, and that's a very rare situation where somebody's actually wanting to change a plan, and we were reasonably comfortable. It looks like a big rise, but it hasn't been one that's moved for a while.
I was very aware of that, but I was on the impression regardless of where you end up with your rate rise, I thought that was important for the process. All the other things are CPI adjusted, that is one of the things you go through and you keep aware of.
I guess the other one was you're saying that we've made a promise for the 5%. You would have been in the room when we assumed we were going to have inflation running at 2%, and with the whole community said and impacted. And again, we've had to make a judgment for that was as tight as we could. That's about as far as I can go on.
I understand that through you, Madam Chair, the part that I was looking for was that if you were going to go above the 25.5, that even though you didn't have an obligation to go to the community, that you would have gone to the community to tell them where you were and what things you were facing, and actually have the community brought closer and understanding why you had to make the decisions or recommendations of the decisions that you are. And that's why my submission is relatively high level and it's not into the detail of the wording, because I think the framework for this is as important as the detail. And this is the only opportunity I've had to actually give you that you've expressed.
Thank you, Lloyd. We have one more question this week. Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, I've just thanks, Madam Chair. I just a question to Lloyd. It's written up there. Do you believe, upon reflection, you are part of the council, to commit to a 5% ceiling beyond that reaches into a new election cycle? I could say, was this a wise commitment to make?
It was a commitment that the council made by majority decision. So the long-term plan always comes after the cycle. It was a commitment we as a team on the day made. And then the next long-term plan has to consider from scratch a new opportunity going forward with all the pressures and tensions that are around it. It's not easy time.
No, just a supplementary, if I may, Madam Chair. It's basically a new council. It's very hard for an old council to make decisions that reach into the future. I know there is a bit of a transition, but it's something that I think we need to be mindful for the future.
Is that a question, Councillor McDonald?
Not quite.
Thank you. We're all doing our best. Thank you very much, Mr. McCallum, for bringing your views and sharing your thoughts with us today. You will get a written reply once we have finished our deliberations. Thank you very much. Pleasure to welcome Federated Farmers representation today. Once again, just while you're settling yourselves, gentlemen, reminding you that we're live streamed and that you have 5 minutes to speak and we have 5 minutes for clarification questions. If you use more of your overall 10 minutes, then we'll see how we go, but I would rather we stuck to the schedule. Thank you. Welcome, please introduce yourselves, just in case.
On behalf of Federated Farmers Southland, Chris Dillon, I'm the current president. Life member David Rose and junior vice president Jason here. David's going to lead this for us.
Yeah, good morning. Well, thank you for the opportunity, and I guess we'll start with the massive rise in rates that happened with the OPP and sort of following on from Lloyd's comments around the undertaking. So it was a massive rise and promises of smaller rises, but they all compound. So it's 30% rise in general rates, then 5%, I think 7%. So that all compounds to a big number. In our submission under 2.4, you will see us talking about inflation on farm inflation that is much greater at any time in the last 40 years, running at over 16%. Which is more than twice the CPI. And that we also have more pressure on product prices, reduced this last year and further softening going forward. So there's lots of pressure on the farming sector and there's no need to impose even more costs.
Sorry, that's my timer. You've got 25 seconds according to my time.
I'd see in the staff report we'd have to give you a bouquet for realising there had been a mistake around irrigation consents for water takes, where the word maximum had been changed with minimum, which would lead to huge costs. So a lot of submissions and a lot of feedback for us on where that had got to. So, and you've also made some other alterations, which we thank you for. So that leads us to 2.12, which is the deemed permitted activity for to do with slight 10 to 15 degrees. We struggle with the $500 charge for what is a tick box exercise on a computer and wonder where the cost is. Cloak does not necessarily mean a bad environmental outcome. And we had 600 farmers at the stadium where we all stood against having to get a wintering consent for something that's always happened. But we did stand for looking after the environment, as we do. Every day farmers look after the environment. But we cannot come here today and give you the okay to charge $500 for a tick box piece of paper. You need to work with us for good outcomes, not to increase what looks like the youth employment. The environment will be worse off if we lose the engagement of farmers. But we totally oppose the $500 cost. On 2.8, we talk about disbursements, and in your charges, there's a large range of costs. We submit that the cost of consultants in Mena Whenua consultation should have a specific line item for transparency and clarity. On costs and charges, we recently submitted to the Southern District Council concerned about the inter-council consents, in particular wastewater. With 3 small town consents for wastewater costing over $3.8 million for preparation of consents with no infrastructure. The question is around inter-council charging on activities which will not be refused. So we're not talking about a new enterprise like a Nichols Mouth or Auckland. Small townships like Winton are looking at $60 million for their wastewater, and if we can't reduce the cost of bureaucracy, amalgamation will happen. We've got to make the ratepayer dollar go through. Lastly, consultation for the upcoming LTP. We look forward to a more proactive engagement than last time, much more clarity on costings than in 2021, and better information to submit on. I think information is key to getting good solutions. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Open to questions.
Questions, councillors, Chairman Horrell, and then Councillor Rodway.
Yes, well, thanks for coming in, and I appreciate the scrutiny you do give our plans and realise that's quite a commitment by all organisations to pick up the capital of money. But just, you made the point on the inflation that everybody's facing, and I'm assuming that you understand that we're facing the same inflation pressures. Your organisation will be aware of what other regional councils around the countryside and changes are. And I think we're probably at the bottom end of that. You also mentioned the deemed permitted activities. In the past legislation, the form of the US, we have a legal requirement to enforce it, whether we agree with the detail or not. And you're probably also aware that we work hard to come up with solutions as low as possible within permitted activity, because we understood the argument that the farm plan wasn't in place, and we are, I think, the cheapest in the country to actually offering compliance with it to a consent. But we are in the middle of this. We cannot ignore legislative requirements.
I guess that thing is around the unacceptable cost. When we did the LPP, you had no cruise ships coming in at all, and you told us that all those costs were essential, and we had massive breaks for us. Since then, you've actually had cruise ships coming in. I think it's well above budget. So we don't understand the $500 fee either, because I think there is a multiplication factor that you do use when you come up with charges. Or something like 2.5, but $500 cost seems ridiculous for what is a tick box exercise. Yeah, just extra costs at us. And that's, there's a lot of pressure out there at the moment, and we're out there every day doing our best for the environment, but these sort of costs.
Yeah, there's just frustration. There's no pushback on that, on the government rules. We've got farm environment plans in place for the Southland plan. And the freshwater farm plans force you into something else instead of just saying hold until we get our own one over the line and we'll be there.
Yeah, so I'll just reiterate the frustration from farmers from the ground at the moment, and we've got to keep this engagement with farmers going, otherwise you're going to lose them. And that's where we're coming from on the deemed permitted activity, because farmers aren't uptaking it because they're frustrated with the continuous deluge of unworkable regulation coming down from central government, and we think it's in the best interest of the local body to be pushing back against central government when you can see that yourself.
We'll get to understand we are working on a hard place with the government legislation. The deemed permitted activity, just with more information, was based on a 3-year process. That's where they come from.
The cost is something you do have discretion over though, isn't it?
Well, the way pays.
Oh, sorry, excuse me, folks. Yeah.
Sorry.
Comment, sorry. I can
Uh,
pose that as a question for you to ponder later.
Well, we're asking the questions at this point, Mr. Rose. Councillor Rodway.
Right, thank you, Madam Chair. It's similar to the chairman's questions, but I do have some sympathy for your pushback on a $500 fee. And I think we need to look at that. You talk about it being a tick box exercise, but in some situations there might need to be a bit of an examination of the situation, which might require a bit of time. By staff to look at that. Would you agree with that?
Well, I guess, Morris, the thing with that is we all pay rates for land sustainability officers, and they came out and give advice on farm, and it's free. And you don't narrow that down to being about any one particular thing. It could well be about that, but it would actually be free. And as I say, I pay hundreds of dollars every year for that. So maybe that's the place where you can deal with that, because farming is very hard to put in a box and say, this is exactly what's going to happen, because all our farms are different. Some have waterways, some don't. Some slope stuff is nowhere near a waterway. So, you know, it's not simple, this stuff, but use the land sustainability team. We already pay for it.
Okay, thank you. And I do appreciate your submission, very detailed, and obviously a fair bit of time on it, so thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McFarlane, then me.
Just in regards to the obviously depermitted activity, I just got a good question out of this. So we understand your situation in regards to the rules and frustration with rules and that, but do you recognise, there's the question, do you recognise as Port at least us as a council have worked as hard as we can to make it simple to be legal if you want to be in regards to the winter grading, take all the why that is here. Sometimes we occasionally need to recognise that we are working pretty hard to work with this government as they throw some rules at us. They're sometimes quite challenging. So I'm just asking, do you recognise that we are trying within the control we have?
I think we've just got to look at the separate issues, Jeremy, and you know, reflect what our members are thinking, and we have a large membership in Southland. So we appreciate and we would want a really good working relationship going forward, and it's essential for the environment. You know, I think of Paul Templeton, who did an Upfield Scholar years ago, who he read all around the world, and he found more rules and worse outcomes, because when you take farmers with you, it happens every day. So that's what we would hope would be more the thing in the future, because when you convince us that something needs to happen, and we'll pick it up and do it every day. But bureaucracy and increased bureaucracy is a struggle for us, because unlike the UK, we don't get paid to do it. In the UK, it's a large chunk of their farming income.
And I'll add to that too, and on the record, I personally stated at our annual AGM that very fact, that we appreciate the hard work that Environment Southland has done under this umbrella, and that you are forced into the corner from central government, and the central government that everyone needs to push back on. But the only way we can push back through central government is through you guys or direct at them, and they don't like dealing with us direct, so it has to come through our local body.
Thank you. Just a quick question from me in relation to 2.17 in your submission that relates to the Biosecurity Act. You've asked us to use the same wording as the Act. And I just wanted to check what version of the Act you were looking at, because what I found was what we have used. So is there a version of the Act that an update that I'm not aware of, maybe?
I can come back to you on that. Lyndall.
It's not a big deal, but I just wanted to make sure that we were.
Was unable to be here today. I can come back to you which version is.
Thank you. Right, that brings us to the conclusion of the submission. Thank you. Thanks, gentlemen, for your time and your detailed submission.
Thank you.
We have one online submitted to join us. She's already joined us. Welcome, Sarah. Just to remind you, you have 5 minutes to raise any pertinent issues from your submission, and then councillors will have 5 minutes to ask questions of clarification. And as you already know, we are live streaming. Just need to make sure you're aware of that. Welcome and go ahead.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm Sarah Crooks and I'm speaking on behalf of Wilkins Farming Company today. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the fees and charges hearing, and also for allowing me to join remotely. The road conditions are certainly a bit icy from my perspective today. So our submission was primarily focused on 2 points. Table 12, minimum, the inclusion of the word minimum around significant groundwater consents versus previous use of the word maximum. I thank the staff for the clarification that it was a mistake and will be corrected in the fees and charges document. However, although it's perceived as a typo, finding minor mistakes like this erodes trust in the fees and charges document and Environment Southland's intentions around that. Finding the typo certainly created a ripple effect for Wilkins Farming of significant time and effort to meticulously check through the document to see what else had possibly been tweaked that we must pick up on and submit on to ensure some fairness. Collaborative efforts in recent times, particularly for the Mataura water users, to build trust and create transparency between parties can be rapidly undone when that kind of alteration is pushed into a document with the likelihood of adoption without any sort of intervention from a consent holder or a ratepayer at consultation time. There needs to be an assurance that accountability is occurring and documents shouldn't be released for public consultation with such a change as what's being responded to by staff as a typo, as this kind of typo can have a really widespread impact. If minimum was left in the table, one of Wilkins' irrigation consents would have gone from approximately $3,000 to a very large amount of around $39,000 for that particular fee. Multiply that change over 10 irrigation consents that are held by Wilkins Farming, then creates a significantly large sum of money that's certainly unbudgeted for. Significant amounts of groundwater fees are collected in the Mataura River catchment, and I believe this catchment would be the largest area of groundwater fee contributors in Southland. Mataura water users are concerned that these collected fees aren't being utilised or prioritised to manage the Mataura water resource appropriately. Collecting more and more fees whilst delivering little positive outcomes to the resource or catchment water users continues to be irresponsible. An example of undelivery of services is the allocation project underway on the Mataura catchment above Gore, where mismanagement of consents within ES by various staff and poor internal business practices has resulted in water users having to pay significant amounts of money for additional technical advice, support and representation to progress and ensure accountability throughout this review project. This is additional money from consent holders being spent on an issue that they did not create but are required to resolve. It has created a double dip effect of paying fees to Environment Southland for science and management of our consents, and then paying again for fair technical advice to ensure the right outcomes from the review project. Consent holders invest a considerable amount of time and money in obtaining consents and paying these annual fees that Environment Southland collects. It isn't reasonable that ES keep increasing the fees and charges while failing to deliver adequate services. The constant increase in fees collected creates no incentive for ES staff to manage resources and interactions with consent holders or applicants effectively, efficiently, or prudently if they can just keep increasing these fees and charges at will on an annual basis. Wilkins would like to see fairness and accountability occurring in fees and charges setting process, and appreciation of the situation that Mataura water users are working through, which has driven our intentions to submit and speak today. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Sarah. Questions, councillor? Anybody? Councillor McPhail?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Jeremy here. Just in regards to this, obviously being transparent with some of these fees and trying to understand, and I know we've had issues looking back, but looking forward, how would you like, and I know through this water allocation debate and sorting out these issues, and now that you have a steering group up in that area and working within the catchment, do you have any suggestions on how we as a council could be more transparent in regards to the fees and things and working together? Do you have any suggestions there?
Yeah, certainly. I think, you know, an intention of doing a bit of a gap analysis on what technical information's up to date and what could be worked through, what consent holders may have in terms of information that they've collected themselves as part of consent process could all contribute to creating an effective program for science work, particularly for the Mataura. There's definitely opportunity there to collaboratively work together, particularly now that the water users up there have this stakeholders group that's being established.
Thank you.
Chairman Laurel.
Yes, I guess the increase is really an inflation-based increase. And like all other businesses, we are affected by inflation, and I guess that is the logic behind it. But it's been really good to see the group that you're also involved with being formed. It might have started from a negative point of the paper allocation, but do you believe that the associations and the structures that are in place are going to be useful going forward?
Yes, I certainly believe that the group that's been established with the Mataura consent holders is something that can create a really strong relationship between science and the consent department, Environment Southland, and really utilise the Mataura River resource effectively and appropriately moving forward. So I think it's going to be a very strong and positive group of water users there. So I definitely believe it's something that Environment Southland should continue to put effort into establishing a strong relationship between those users and Environment Southland and keep building a good partnership that has a high trust level.
Thanks. Any other questions? Thanks very much then, Sarah. That brings your section to a close. Thanks.
Thank you.
So that brings this section of the submissions process to an end. Just a reminder to submitters that you'll get a written response once we've finished deliberations. It's up to councillors now to debate and deliberate all of the submissions, and I would remind you that even all of the submissions should be given equal weighting, regardless of whether there's been a verbal presentation today or not. They are all to be considered as important and with similar weighting. Okay. We have the option of a brief adjournment before we launch into deliberations, but I'm also happy to box on straight away. So I think perhaps moving on is fine with me, if that's all right with everybody. We'll just get on with that. Yep, great. So you all have all of the submissions in front of you, and it's not my intention at this point to go through each one individually, but I'm open to advice on that. Rachel, have you got?
Yes, for you, Chair. One approach would be to work through the table that staff have prepared and to make decisions by that table.
Yep. Okay, yeah, no, let's do that. That's easy. Right, so on page 15 of your papers, is where you need to be, and we will work through the submissions and the staff commentary in order. Everybody know where we are? Great, so the first submission is Mr. McCallum's. Summary is there and the staff commentary is there. Any questions or suggestions? We followed up from that, please. Staff recommendation is to note the report, the submission rather. Councillor McCallum.
All through the submissions and Lloyd's obviously brought it up, and we understand and are also living it, the pressures that are financial pressures out there, and we know that the person wants to reflect on these things when we're working this out, but at the end of the day, we're a business and there's costs, and I think we've done a pretty good job of keeping those down is to a level that we can. It is a budget and they do fluctuate, numbers do fluctuate, as anybody into business knows. We're very fortunate even going through this process. It indicates what the marine fee means to us. And I know there's a wee bit of talk about that, whether that's good or bad, but we do rely on it to balance our books too. But Lloyd's comments in regards to, they're probably very valid about how we do business. I'm hoping that we've got a bit of credibility out there, not just staying on the sidelines of the fields and don't get thrown too much muck occasionally, but there is always people don't like paying money and on the same as everyone else if we don't have to. So we're always we're fast to the tax, and we do things review gatherers. But look, they're valid points, but there is one, Lloyd did bring up about how we got the information within our systems. We need to probably make sure that we've got a very clear pathway for our people to use technology and make it as simple to get access to this stuff. And we're always trying to improve that. And I know there's different degrees of experience working with technology, but we've got to accommodate for everybody's ability to make sure they can get access to stuff. So, I'm just commenting on what is said. So.
Thanks. Any other comments? I've got Councillor Evans and then Councillor Pemberton and Chairman Horrell and Councillor Ridley.
Thank you, Chair. I know Lloyd said no value loop for consenting charges, and that's one concern, and the need of a value proposition. The one concern when we were dealing with our rates increases and voting on them was I needed to know the value, or I needed to know the reason why the increase was going up. And I needed to know a better reason than inflation. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, my ratepayers are going to be the ones standing on my doorstep asking that question, why? And if I don't believe that the increases are valid enough, other than just inflation, which they are less than inflation, then it obviously seems that Lloyd doesn't see there is a value proposition within increases as well. So Lloyd would be very much like my ratepayer standing on my doorstep asking what the value is we're getting from the increases. So it was interesting to hear that. The other thing was the trust in the annual plan was raised regarding trust with the community. That's concerning. Also the fact that as no longer a councillor, he listens more. I know I listen more now as a councillor than I did as a ratepayer. There are a lot of thoughts coming out of these submissions, and I think we want to go on paper.
Thanks, councillor. Councillor Pemberton.
Yeah, just, I just want to touch on the comment that, you know, it's for us to absorb any costs versus our income. Yes, we are a business, but we only go to market for what is required on our team to run operationally. So we aren't going to, as a farmer, I wouldn't go to the frontier or remember and say, well, my break-even is this, so we need this. So I'm just mindful that we try to, through this period of inflation, we're still trying to keep our services here. So I wouldn't want us to drop our services just to try and match some small percentiles in the context of things.
Chairman Horrell.
Yes, Madam Chair. I think one of the things that a lot of these submissions are probably like added at the bottom. I'm happy to agree with the staff, noting things that we also appreciate time taken, and we appreciate the feedback. This is an opportunity for people to come in, and while some of it mightn't have a formal change, that feedback is appreciated. And yeah, I guess there was comments about moving away from the 5%. We've had the inflation as well as everybody else, and I want to place it on record that we went through our budgets with great detail to actually get down to the level that we did. The reason we didn't submit was that it wasn't a significant change, and that we put a lot of time and stuff came back. But the work that we repeated down, it wasn't business as usual. And I think that is something probably that could be noted in a lot of these submissions where it is actually question the need to go on one place.
Thank you, councillor Rodway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I'd like to propose a change in this, as a result of the Federated Farms submission on the deemed permitted activity cost of $500. And they suggested that it could be done for free by the land sustainability staff. I agree with that, but I see the merit in that argument. As a compromise, I would suggest that the fee should be the lesser of actual costs for $500. The submitters say that in many cases it will be a tick box exercise. If the farmer supplied all the information that was required, I imagine this could be the case, but in some of the situations it might take a little chilling and trying to get all the information needed. So if I could propose a motion that it be the lesser of actual costs for $500, that might help.
Yeah,
just
Yeah,
we're going through.
I know that there is a recommendation, so maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit.
yeah, a little bit, but it's gonna require a bit of thought actually. Sorry, who's?
Councillor McDonald.
Oh, sorry. Peter, do you have something to say about Mr. McCallum's submission?
Yeah, I do, Madam Chair, just briefly. Could I just say that it was quite a very good submission, sort of regarding Lloyd's recent history with the council. I think it's quite powerful, but probably one thing that I think this council needs to take especially note especially is the comment around, I think the words were, we're not talking to people face to face, and that I think one of the other comments is that we have a lot of work to do to reconnect with the community. I think they're words that we should heed and take seriously from this submission. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Folks, can I just suggest that we all acknowledge that there is room for improvement as far as, you know, the accessibility of the information or perceived accessibility of the information and opportunities for communication, etc. Because we could spend all day talking about that, and we understand that that's something that is a working on thing for the council generally, but that it doesn't necessarily specifically apply to the deliberations around the fees and charges schedule. So I would like us to focus on the submissions and any changes to the schedule that will be necessary. I will follow up as best I can and make sure that the feedback that the submitters get acknowledges that we are aware that, there are always things that we can do better, and that we appreciate their input. So I'd like to leave that discussion to the side and just focus on what if any changes we need to make to the schedule. Okay, which takes us to, firstly, I'm not picking up that there is anything specific from Councillor McCallum's, Mr. McCallum's submission that we want to make changes, to make changes. So we will note his submission and move on to Federated Farmers submission, which takes us to Councillor Rodway's point. Hold that thought though, because I'm aware that one of our other presenters for an item later in the meeting has a time commitment, but I'm unfortunately not really willing to move that item. I would like to finish this conversation before we move on. I don't want to adjourn right this minute because I'd like to deal with the Federated Farmers submission first. Mr. Phillips, how much time do you have available?
I've got plenty of time at the moment. So I've got all day.
Oh, okay.
So I can come back if that suits best.
Yes.
I'm enjoying the conversation.
Okay, so we're not under any pressure to have your item. Fine. Okay, so we will box on. Thank you. Right. Phew. Yeah. So we are now considering the Federated Farmers submission. And Councillor Rodway has made a suggestion. I'm interested in the other councillors' thoughts on that. Councillor McPhail?
I think there was a lot of discussion in regards to the DPA and the cost, and I think support Councillor Rodway's option. Because there are, and to be honest, to give clarity, I've got a DPA myself, so which was a very straightforward procedure. But I have heard that the other people, it's been not so straightforward. So there has been, obviously, I think mine would be like a year, and it may have been a lot cheaper on a time basis. So, but that's just some from experience, and then I've also heard from other people that it's been quite a process. So, so definitely, certainly support that. Thank you. Regards to that.
Jim Horrell?
I'm a little uncomfortable to change it when you've already had people that have applied and paid the $500. I'd probably prefer we reviewed it during the LTP. The points are valid that we've actually done an auditing exercise on $500, and the old user pays principle I actually agree with that if somebody's got to do it, if it's cheaper. And that's normally the way our charges go. You put a price up front for a consent or whatever. It takes longer, it costs more. And again, and also conversely, that if it's less, you might get a discount. So I think that those sort of principles I'd be comfortable with, but I'm thinking that we haven't had a lot of them, and some have already paid their $500. I'm just I'm a bit reluctant to actually change it halfway through the season. The debate is good, but at the moment I'm considering actually reviewing that.
Thank you. Tony, did you want to comment at this point? Mr. House?
Only when the debate's finished, Chair, if you wanted to.
Has anybody else got anything to add first? Councillor Cook?
The staff response there suggests there was a reason for smoothing of that $500 amount. It wasn't just an arbitrary decision. So I think I would like to hear from the staff about the background too. Yeah, Morris's suggestion on the surface is quite reasonable, but I think it might be for individual landowners, but we're applying a charge across the whole of the council's area. Smoothing you, some cost is going to be much more than that $500.
Mr. Hobbs?
Chair, yeah, thank you. I'm happy to provide some clarification. I think that we need to make whether it's a deemed permitted activity or a consent, we need to make an assessment. So it isn't a tick box exercise. It's actually a full assessment of the criteria that we require. So that in itself requires the time. So it's not and in some cases, you're quite correct, Councillor McPhail, some of those assessments might be a little bit easier depending on the information provided. But essentially, as it says in the staff commentary, staff time involved in considering the application against the resident, planning permissions and preparing a certificate. But fundamentally, when we set out this approach, our focus was to keep it as cost effective as possible from the outset. And we went through quite a rigorous process to try and identify where we could do that as efficiently and cheaply as possible. So from a staff perspective, I'm confident we've kept the cost down to a minimum, and that represents the actual work that we do to make the decision to issue DPAs or not. So that's the background. But it certainly isn't a tick box exercise. We have to make an assessment based on the information provided, and then that's where the cost is.
Councillor Rodway, do you have?
No, I can understand that, and also that yes, if you do go, if you say the actual cost, then that has to be calculated. And I take the chairman's point that some people have already paid the $500 and they might be a bit grumpy and want a refund, which would cause more administrative costs. So well, I have proposed the motion. I'll leave it there and see what people think about.
Okay, so you still want to?
Seconded.
Okay. So we have
a motion would be to change the
wording would be for less. What remind me of the wording, please.
The wording would be for a deemed permitted activity, the cost would be the actual costs. No, sorry, the lesser of the actual costs or $500. The lesser of those two.
Councillor McPhail, you have the opportunity.
Just, I don't know, certainly second of this motion. It's about saying to people that if you're efficient and you've got the information, you've taken the time and everything, and reward it. And this is the whole concept of dealing with the community. Reward the people that actually got it sorted, and we're not throwing everybody in the same bucket, so to speak. That you're all the same, and there will be some that will be harder, but at the end of the day, it's still, we're not saying it's going to cost you more than $500. But the same, look, if it's reasonably quick, someone's got the details, and we give them a bit of a pat on the back in regards to this. So, that's what I'm saying. And look, I've paid my $500. I'm not wanting it back, but it's just more looking ahead. And in regards to this, isn't going to go away. In regards to certified freshwater farm plan, people will still have to have these certifications in Southland next year for winter grazing. So, they won't be able to have the certified freshwater farm plan. So, this is the permitted activity will still be in play.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table, but there are obvious contributions, so we will continue with a very brief conversation before I put that motion. So I've got Councillor Horrell and then Councillor Evans and then Mr. Hobbs. Is that right? Yeah, okay, so we'll do it in that order. Thanks.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'm going to speak against the motion because of actually, well, I agree with the principle of the something that does it more efficiently, they should get the benefit. The motion is we still cap it at $500, so that means that people who cost more actually get a subsidy. So that side of it, I'm not that comfortable with. The other thing is, looking at the history of this, we The government brought in the legislation, we in Southland submitted that farm plans were a far more environmental tool than the resource consent process. And the concern with Federated Farmers raised some time ago was they expected certified farm plan option to be available before the winter grazing NES came into effect. And to that end, that's put in a lot of work to actually find a cheaper alternative, because we were bound to, we can't ignore national influence. So we did a lot of work to come up with an alternative. We're the only place in the country that actually offered another alternative. And yeah, have to review it next year, but I think we're halfway through the season. And then you've got to, the cost of some, so some of it along the line, if it costs more than $500, we've got to find it. So yeah, so I'm going to vote against it. So
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Evans.
With regards to the deemed privileged activity, $500 fee. It's there because of the grazing process. Has that been improving? Obviously, it's getting the desired result. We don't graze on more than 15%. Is that right? Yeah. And I noted that the submitter did ask for better information before the long-term plan for consultation. And I suspect that's probably the best time for this to be submitted again by submitters, to be fair against people that have already paid the fee. But also we need to measure the results from us charging a fee, deemed permitted activities, whether it's working or not, reducing flow into waterways and runoff from winter graze. So I would vote against it for this time, but I would vote for it with the long-term plan through consultation.
Thanks, Councillor. Yep, it's clear. Just a final comment, Mr. Hulse.
No,
well, Ms. Falk now.
So I just want to be clear about why we created this particular kind of product. So at the time that we proposed this, there needed to be 3 different suites of consent opportunity. The farm plans were not completed from the government, and we wanted to give farmers an opportunity to have certainty that they were compliant at a price that was reasonable. So a consent, an entry level consenting process is like that. It's we do nothing at $500 with staff time to go through a process. Now I understand what the submitters were saying about the tick box exercise. Part of making this simple for the process was to enable people to do this online, but the consent is not provided online. The work is done by staff after people have gone through the process. We want to make it simple and make it as inexpensive as possible. So if we were to say actual and reasonable, we possibly spend the money actually doing the administrative work that we're looking for in terms of the time. I would suggest that nobody would end up paying less than $500 if we went to actual and reasonable. So I would, this is not, we did not just make up a number. We looked at what time it takes for our staff to do this work, and we wanted to make this a reasonable and inexpensive way to give farmers certainty that they were compliant without the farm plans being in place. So that was its intent, that was its purpose. And I don't believe that there's going to be anybody who's benefited by doing action on reasonable. I think you'll find that people will be being charged more than $500. And we did that because the farm plans were not in place at that stage. And also we did that because we had commentary back from Fonterra that in order to actually to receive the cooperative difference, farmers need to demonstrate that they're compliant with regulations. So to have nothing in place with farm plans would be to lose that compliance. So that was also a reason why we did this. So that's, I would not be encouraging you to move from $500. understand the submission and perhaps that needed to be explained more clearly in our FAQs and in our media statement. That's the rationale.
Thank you, that's very clear. So we have a motion on the table, that the amendment be to of actual or lesser than 500, whichever is the lesser, right? Yep. So I'll put that motion, having had some thorough discussion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? No. The motion is lost. Thank you though, and submitters will appreciate that we've had a thorough debate.
We note the submissions from Federated Farmers.
Thank you. And yes, thank you. We need to vote on each one of those acknowledgements of the submissions.
Normally, well, in the past, we have voted on each one.
Yes, I know. Yes, councillor.
Just in regards to just only one thing on the bids we just talked. In regards to, could I just bring up that there also there's some wording and things within that acts and that. Could we get that clarified?
Well, my question, are you referring to my question about the Biosecurity Act?
Yeah, the acts,
Yeah,
but
well, then-
that they are just a clarify who's right. I mean, just to make sure
Yeah.
they're right.
I think we can direct staff to double check that, but I don't think it will materially make any difference.
I won't answer that.
Oh, sure.
Madam Chair, we referred those particular legal questions on to our
Great.
our legal team, just to ensure that we were correct. The legal team that actually also helped us develop the wording. And it's their commentary that you see here.
Thank you. Great.
And just, I think probably in the notes, we should include perhaps some of the words that Will use in explaining the reasons.
Yeah.
For the activity. I think what we've got through, what we did, Federated Farmers in the room, I think that explanation should go.
Somehow.
It doesn't have to be long, but
yeah,
there's some very good points made there. I think that
thank you. So yeah, I think we will go their way. We need to move and second each some of us that discussion that we're noting or making any changes. So we haven't somebody moved it, Councillor Cook did.
So we Gypsy and.
Yep, let me note only. Yeah, thank you. And Cinder, please. Councillor Evans, all those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried, thank you. Wilkins Farm. Any discussion? Questions? Councillor Fowl.
I think there's been some good points in regards to, I think it's more looking for the future, looking ahead. Now, Sarah and the steering group in regards to what's coming up here in regards to the irrigation and the challenge. And obviously, there's a theme to transparency with some of this money going, how it's being used, and science and monitoring. And I think we've got to be able to provide that, and I think certainly looking in the future, working with these groups and catchments and dealing with it, it's a good avenue to get down on the ground level. We need to be working together, so because they'll naturally have some good ideas of maybe where those seriously the gaps and trying to work those things out on the ground. So, and it's about how to try and bring that in, or how do we word it? I've also discussed might not necessarily be in the fees and schedule, but how we engage with those groups and have their input. And to ask management how we do that in regards to take note. I'm just encouraging that we carry on. Obviously, there has been a few issues with data collecting science over the years, but they're not looking back. They want to look forward and work together for a solid approach. So I'll leave that with staff.
Councillor Evans and Councillor Pemberton, and then me.
During the submission, there was a couple of comments that I noted that were quite focused. One was fees double dipping. Suggestion there was some double dipping happening with regards to fees. And also an increase in fees while failing in processes. Now with that suggestion, I would like to go back to the submitter, or someone could go back to the submitter and ask for examples, because making those sorts of suggestions, which doesn't seem to be in the submission, but it was in the verbal part of the submission. I'd like some examples of that. I think that would be quite good.
We'll cut maybe in a minute. Councillor Pemberton and then Councillor McFarlane.
Yeah, probably just the Wilkins one, and I think Peter Farms touched on too, just the wording, process and how we go to see the information we're releasing is correct. I know there was nothing sinister in it, but obviously I do understand the stress it created, so probably just question staff, what is our processes to guarantee we're across this before?
Tanya.
Thank you. Look, I appreciate that, and I apologise to the council and the ratepayers. We did undertake a substantial change to this document with the intent of improving it. And I can say that it is my responsibility, but I do engage a number of staff to read this document word for word multiple times. So the fact that that was missed was my responsibility to make sense of that. It just means that we need to try harder with every single word in this document, but there was no malintent at all.
No, and I would suggest, Tanya, that we all saw that document too.
Yeah.
So the draft slipped past us as well. So there's a collective responsibility. But thank you for that acknowledgement. Councillor McFarlane, did you want to reply to Councillor Evans?
Yes, just to clarify, and I was just thinking, while we were talking then, there's obviously under the water allocation debate, we're sorting that out, and the Matera conservation auditors, had to be analysed and things, and there were a few holes here and there, and data collection or just generally monitoring bits and pieces, but done well here. But I did actually say it would be good in regards to the city. In regards to it would be a good, I think it's going to be a way through the process to actually have a bit of a debrief and just see and learn from what happened. So some of us been involved in that, especially may after some of the way they
the way it was worded.
Yeah, you might understand.
So Councillor, my take on some of the Wilkins submission is that they were partly seeking clarity on what testing is done and what monitoring is done and the likes. So I think it's maybe appropriate that if we ask staff to investigate not only what is being done, but where best to present that information for consent holders, so that if the fees and charges schedule is not the right place for it, then where is it? So that and Sarah's point about encapsulating the consent holders data as well, I'd be interested in hearing from staff at a later date perhaps about how best we can have that knowledge ourselves and communicate it with consent holders.
Through the chair, I can perhaps provide a preliminary response. What we have done traditionally is when the invoices go out for these fees and charges, have information in an accompanying letter, but it may not be at the detail I think the the submitter was talking about, and so we will certainly investigate how we can get that information out to consent holders in a better format, but also incorporate what information they may have or be able, certainly how we could do that.
And all due respect, some of that detail may be inappropriate for us to include in things. So there's an evaluation of what's appropriate also required. With that request to staff, oh, sorry, Peter, I can't see your little golden hand. Sorry, go to you first and then I'll conclude.
Just briefly, Madam Chair, I just want to support Jeremy's words about the submission, and Sarah's pointing towards the future and making those comments around the water users group. But also I would like to say amongst that, you know, if they have a collection of stakeholders there in their group, there's also has to be acknowledged of a wider stakeholder grouping that they sit within too. So quite often we hear about people, this is what we want, and yeah, that's the hard thing for this council, is we have to mesh or weave all those views together. So look, I think that needs to be encouraged, that group to probably go forward and consult on issues in their catchment. That's just my view.
Thank you. So, given that there are no material changes apart from the correction in the wording, I think, from the Wilkins submission, would somebody like to move?
Thank the Wilkins Group for putting in their submission.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Seconded, Councillor Morrison. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Right. And moving on to the submitters that did not speak today. First one is Grant McGregor's submission regarding gravel extraction. I think we had a fairly good explanation of that earlier from Councillor Cook.
A commentary there asking of us people who supply concrete, and they charge by the cubic metre. Everybody in industry charges by the cubic metre. For an extractor to say we'd rather pay by weight is an outlier.
Interesting. Councillor Rodway.
Well, I'll just push back a little bit on that. I think that the submitters, Grant McGregor and Phil Hogan, are very respectable participants in the field, and I know at the start says that they will will take this into consideration for preparation for future updates, etc. So I think that's a reasonable response, and I do hope that you know, we can look at the pros and cons of it.
Thank you. Councillor McPhail.
Yeah, I would agree with Councillor Rodway. I think the process is coming up. We can certainly have a look at it. It's been up to 6 to 8 in regards to what material they're actually getting charged for and things. So as long as we comms go right for that, but certainly long-term plan on looking ahead, we can evaluate it, get a bit more information, and make a better call on it.
Thanks. Anu, did you want to just reiterate what you said earlier, perhaps?
Yes, I think that's fairly clear. There are a cubic metre. It is common and throughout the industry. In fact, I think in every regional council are charging by cubic metre. But Grant's submission was genuinely intended to help us simplify and increase the accuracy. So as I say, it's worth discussing further with the stakeholders.
Agreed.
Move
that we note Mr. McGregor's submission and look forward to the continuing gravel debate, which always makes me smile. So we've got a mover, Councillor McPhail, and seconded Councillor Rodway. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Fulton Hogan, shall we assume the same for that conversation? Thank you, Councillor McPhail, seconded. Chairman Horrell, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. John McPherson's submission. Any
response to those is a good response.
Yes, it is.
No submission. Thank them for putting it in.
Thank you. Any other?
I'll move that.
Second, Councillor Cook's moved. Councillor McPhail second. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. And Mr. English's.
I'm happy to move this. I actually rang me to clarify it, and we got it sorted out pretty quick.
Oh, okay.
About the wording, which a lot of them pick up. So yeah, I'm happy to move that it's sorted out.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor McPhail, seconded. Councillor Evans, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. And Sarah. Sarah's submission.
I move to note the mission and thank them for taking time for it.
Thank you, councillor Cook, seconded, councillor Rodway, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye, against, carried, thank you. Goodness. Right, going back to a different piece of paper. Thank you, everybody, for your astute and applied debate and deliberations. Given those who we've got to, we need to move recommendation H, which is to recommend to council that the updated proposed fees and charges schedule 2023-24 be adopted pursuant to section 36 and 36AA of the Resource Management Act 1991 and sections 83 and 87 of the Local Government Act 2022. Somebody like to move that, please? Thank you, councillor McPhail, seconded councillor Morrison. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much, everybody. That is the first one of those we've done in a really long time. So well done. Thank you, staff. And we did okay at keeping to time. And on that note, we will move to item 2. Which is forestry issues and potential responses.
So take the paper thread, but there's nothing that was very into me as well. First, we presented item, so we both can answer any questions that you might have. You'll see from the item just a summation of where we're currently at from a policy perspective. I could add there's obviously work that happens in Paul's division as well in terms of compliance in the catchment integration team and the connection to forester companies and industry, and they're obviously quite intimately involved in the implementation of the NES plantation forestry as well, providing advice. So just noting that in addition to what is in the paper, as I say, take it as read, and the next steps that are within there reflect conversations that we've had with yourselves previously in workshops, and the addition of the released a statement from government in terms of the amendments to the NESPF caught us on the hop as we were finalising the paper. So to answer any questions, Chair.
Thank you. I'm somewhat embarrassed to admit that I'm having trouble hearing it as well.
Oh, sorry.
So it must be just the universe. That is not why I mentioned it at this particular point. So please, everybody speak up. Councillor Cook, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I hope I'm speaking up. I haven't got my hearing aids in today, so I'm going to look at me. I've raised this issue before, and I'm pleased to see the report. Thank you for that. My concern, and it is a concern, is that under the revised RMA legislation which is coming through, we're required to have a regional plan. Now, I'm not seeing that here because we're going to have a plan. Southland District have got a plan. Invercargill City have got a plan. And I'm sure Gore District will have a plan as well. Now, we actually have to have a regional plan. So I'm just hoping that we have a process in place that provides a regional plan which we all agree on.
Chair, happy to answer to that if that will assist. So at this point, we are expecting 2 plans would be required as part of the RM reforms. We'd need a spatial plan in the first instance, regional spatial strategy, which would be an entirely different beast from what we've currently got, but provides an awful lot of opportunity to tackle issues such as forestry. And the second thing that we would require is a regional plan. So that's the amalgamation of all the current. So there would be one NBA plan for the region, which would include the district plan provisions as well as things that we have in our regional policy statements and our regional plans. The timeframe for those things is
if the legislation goes ahead in this term, we will need an NBA plan, one for the region for probably between 5 to 7 years. So there will be more conversations about that as part of the LTP deliberations. But before we got there, we'd have to do the spatial element. So there will be an opportunity for the conversation around quality feed into the early stages of development for the regional spatial strategy.
Chairman Horrell?
Yes, we haven't figured out. Thank you for the report. There is quite a bit of activity in the space at the moment. But the reality is the government did promise at the start of this term they would directly address, I was saying, but not before the election. So things are certainly not settled. I'm still quite strongly of the opinion that we could come up with a southward response around the corner with the authorities. We could move on that quite quickly, and the next step is actually what we put in that forward. We still need to this changing our RPS, changing our regional plan change to a regional response. But then the district plans will also have to give effect to that higher order. So people could. So for property rights, you can be able to do whatever you like. Yeah, that's fine, but if you didn't come up with for that would probably end up in taking 18 months or 2 years to get things in place. They may well face a discretionary resource consent, which would cover all regions that are of concern to the region. But the amount of uncertainty out there at the moment, hearing the debate, the sooner even if we need to have that council conversation first. But the industry is looking for direction, and I think the goes in order to at least have a corner and we can talk about the work and in the court because every second day you read something else at the moment, and I think it's an area we can show some leadership as we have done in the past, with bringing the parties together and coming up with something that's reasonable.
Two quick questions from me. Oh, sorry, Peter, I'll do mine first if you don't mind. Just wondering what your feeling is for how the TAs are, how willing the TAs are to have these conversations without wanting you to step over the boundaries. But also what if there's anything that governance level can do or need to do to help with those conversations.
So my answer is SDC are definitely keen on moving this immediately. Russian are underway in the background, monitoring change as we take. So definitely on movements before are underway with their proposed plan. They're really quickly to get some conversations going there. They want to really think like so. Maybe from that point.
I think as well, just to add through you, Chair, we've talked about it at the second tier environment group level, so that 2-tier group that reports up to the mayoral forum. The request from and the chief executives forum, obviously, and keen to go through to the next mayoral forum with an update on where to next. But as Liz alluded to, there is desire to move swiftly in this topic. So one of my as well would be table as we're having
Right, I'll do sing out if there's anything we can help with.
Make a suggestion for Councillor McDonald when he's not letting him to be on.
He's just going to speak, so we'll let him speak, and then he will turn his microphone off.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. I think the issue really, there was quite a lot of real disappointment that central government has handed down to local government our responsibility to try and slow the pace of this land use change. The problem is are we going to do it in a timely fashion? It probably looks as though we won't, to be honest. we need to really understand the public pressure on us. Everyone's wanting these constraints to happen, and we're not talking about stopping forestry. We're going to need that well into the future, as the Minister said, James Shaw, that it is a large part of our climate response. But we're going to be needing well into the future 20 to 30,000 hectares a year throughout the entire country. But we must signal, it's really important that we signal the change and the slowdown and stop, slow the pace of that change down, of that forestation. So I think the challenges for Southland is that we get together as soon as possible and just work this out and get it done. And I support what Nicole said, a regional process. We can't wait for anyone else. We've just got to get on and get it done.
Thanks, councillor. With that, somebody like to move the recommendations, noting that the recommendation 2 is to endorse the next steps. I'm not going to suggest that we add with speed in the wording, but but we get that feeling. Councillor Evans has moved and Councillor Pemberton has seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Oh, sorry.
Just before we do that, are we having a discussion with Clearly, because I think that's really important when we start moving forward.
Yes, so I'd say that in the next steps on page 99.3 mentions iwi partners and voluntary groups. So we think that the Braves are captured there and that will go to the. Thank you.
Sorry, all the motions on the table. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Next team. Right. Now that Mr. Phillips has gone missing. Which gives staff time to load up all the, or do whatever the doing is. Thank you.
Just to highlight that
Sorry, folks, excuse me.
At 1 o'clock, I just thought about 10 to 1, I'm going to have to leave for an appointment. I could be away for an hour. I just wanted to.
Okay. We might have caught up some stuff by then.
But it didn't make sense to us, so we just.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the time? Well, for what time? Yeah, we'll probably just break it all.
Yeah. I mean, any question would come with the. Yeah, but the new best reform schedule for one, so the chair, please. Oh, what do you require outside of discussion? These are. Yeah. What do you need to get direction from everybody over these papers? Because they need to keep a quorum for that.
Don't leave the room again. Oh, right. Sorry, folks, slight interlude and apologies to those of you online who are dazed and confused.
Question about that jam, just like, with haven't the rules changed and is Councillor McDonald still able to vote?
It does count. Yes, it does count.
So you did actually, you will still have.
Right.
So I just want to be clear about that because the rules changed again post Gabriel.
Right. Next, Gabriel. So we are now on item 3, which is the Te Puka Rakiura Trust update. Yes, thank you. My pleasure to welcome Mr. Phillips to give us an update on the work of the trust. And you've just been handed a copy of the presentation, which is going to magically appear behind me.
Right.
Welcome, Rob.
Good to see everyone. I've been in this chamber for about 13 months, I suppose. Could be back. And some new faces. So I'm Rob Phillips. I'm the Southland Director on good to be with you. And I just wanted to give you a bit of an update today as to where we've got to. I'm not sure we've got Campbell with you on
He
Zoom.
was there, but might have given up.
I'm sure he'll be-
Absolutely, I'm here.
Oh,
Great, Campbell.
kia ora,
The
Campbell.
voice of Hawke's Bay. So Campbell's our project director, and he's a key man. So look, just a bit of background. You know, Rekiura, it's a real treasure, and it's our third biggest island in New Zealand, and it's like a biodiversity hotspot. We've got Over Island is predator free, and it's a real draw card, and we've got a national movement of predator free 2050 that's sort of trundling along. And Rekiura is a key step along the way towards achieving that. Some discussion about whether that's realistic or not, but I'm not too worried about that. But actually, certainly Rekiura is. There's been a lot of talk about forming a predator-free program on Rekiura for the last 10 or 12 years. There's a group formed 5 or 6 years ago, a leadership group that we were represented, and Brian McSmith was represented on. The whole lot of work around and set up the trust basically, which was put in place at the end of last year. So we can flick to the next slide. Keep running the slides.
Not me.
Not much longer. So look, we've got a whole lot of funding partners. Obviously, Ngāi Tahu is our anchor, if you like, in this. We're totally involved in the project. The TT Islands, the Maryland, the Rekiura Marylands Trust is a key player. Rural New Zealand, also key. The Department of Conservation, of course, this is also important. In the New Zealand resources, are also involved in Chatham District as the other player. So next slide, please. Yeah, we've got a video. I think Campbell, is this where the video kicks in?
Correct, Rob.
So we've got a wee short video to play now, which will just help set the scene for the project. So if our technology works, we'll give it a wee short, familiar faces.
We've had this issue before when we played third-party videos on Zoom and
You could have seen the pictures before somewhere.
I can just comment, yeah.
Well, then interpretive dance, perhaps. My
It's a
favourite.
fantastic project, a lot of people involved.
we need to turn the council chambers mic off so we can hear this.
No, we won't get any sound.
Okay, so we're not getting sound now though. It thinks council chambers is talking.
So you can see there's a whole lot of pretty special species on the island. Kakapo's obviously is a key one. Stuart Ball has been a key player along the way. He's involved in our advisory group. Who provide advice and feedback to us. And he was instrumental in helping set up. It's Bridget Carter, who's if you like, Campbell's 2IC. She's on the island. She was the ex-stock manager there. And it's Kevin Carter, her partner. So we're really lucky to have some really strong presence on the island in terms of some expertise. Kevin's an ecologist by background, and he's got an amazing knowledge of what's there and a very experienced background. And so he's been a key for us. What a pity we haven't got the sound. I'm sure they'll do a much better job than I am. But Ngāi Tahu's very owns this project. It's really important to them, obviously, and their links to the TT Islands, where they've already got a whole lot of predator-free work underway. A lot of those islands are already predator-free, and it's, it made a real difference to the ecological health of those islands. That might be it. So that's good. That was a quick run through. You've got some nice images, if nothing else.
Yeah, so look, here's our team. We've got, Paul Norris on the left. He's our chair. He's stepped down at the moment. He's acting CE for what they call themselves now, Real Journeys, not Real Journeys, Real NZ. Yeah, so he's stepped into that role, and I'm taking over the co-chair role. Estelle Lesker there, you'll know well. Fran from Southern District, Janet Copeland, a number of you will know. Anu Makara, strong in the business area. Dean Ponga, who's the co-chair. So you all know Dean very well, and myself there in the flash jacket. And then we've got our Apprenticeship Record Engagement Advisory Group. So these are the group that sort of did the work and set up the trust. They represent most of the players and all of the players actually. So I've got Ali Mead, the ES Biodiversity Biosecurity Operations Manager, who's played a key role in this, and really appreciate you making her available for some of this work. Gail Compton, you know well. Stuart Bull, we've got Tony Davis, George Skerritt, Ray Phillips. I think that might have missed a couple of names there, but so the role of the advisory group is really our feedback loop. They're our link to the community. They provide advice, feedback, and direction. They set up the trust. They were in a bit of a transition process. They had a lot of ownership initially. They set up the trust now to do the job. So the trust is doing that. We still work closely with. Pretty fair just in terms of making sure. Next slide. So we've set up a team in the last 12 months. We appointed Ken Waliki, sort of, I think June, July 2022. He's strong regional council background, trained in Taranaki, which is a great place for training. I might have mentioned that before. And also worked in Hawke's Bay for a number of years. Manager there. So he was appointed and he set up his team. And I'll just hand over to Campbell now, who will introduce his team and the sort of work they're doing. Campbell, can you pick it up from here as we talked?
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. And look, thanks everyone. Just before I roll on with the presentation, just checking that everyone can hear me all right.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, so look, just very briefly, so I had background in biosecurity, biodiversity, forestry and catchment management roles largely in councils, in senior management or leadership roles, and also in the last decade, large-scale predator projects. And so the opportunity to come and work on something as transformational as predator-free Rakiura has been actually really interesting and really exciting. So look, in terms of the team though, so we're a small team. It's really 4 FTEs, including myself. And at this stage, we're working across a range of different things you'd expect to see in a small team scenario. But particularly this last 12 months has been focused on work programs around the things which you would probably call foundations to getting a successful project up and funded. And so realistically, that's things like the biosecurity context. And I want to acknowledge the previous work that's been done by Ali Mead and her team in this area from Environment Southland. But also research is a significant part of this overall project. There's a fair bit that's not yet understood, and research is critical to understanding some of those unknowns. But also there's operational delivery around certain aspects of the project. Particularly in the last 6 months, we've done some work around hedgehogs and mice. And then the community context on this is really critically important, as is the importance of Ngāi Tahu as a foundation partner. So that's really our people in the current, if you like, sort of a quick précis of the last 12 months in terms of the team. If we could flick on to the next slide, that would be appreciated. But look, this project is technically complex because we're trying to eradicate 6 predator species. So that's possums, feral cats, all 3 species of rats on Rakiura. So that's Norway, ship rats and Kiori. And in addition to that, we're also targeting hedgehogs. So I think the key message from this is it is a technically complex eradication project. And added to that, there are additional factors which make it really potentially transformational as well. We can flip to the next slide, that would be appreciated. Now this might look a little busy, but what this is really showing you is the key island eradications that either have already taken place around the globe or in the case of subantarctic orbital islands, is about to take place within the next 18 months to 2 years, subject to funding. The point here is to try and look at the two things. Firstly, the number of species that are being targeted. That's number one. And then the scale of the projects. Now, each of these maps is roughly to scale. It's going from Lord Howe Island right through to the South Georgia Islands, and varying there from about 1,400 hectares to about 380,000 hectares. The critical thing around Arakiura is the number of predator species being eradicated, its size at around about 175,000 hectares, and the fact that it's got an in situ population with a significant amount of industry around things like aquaculture, fishing, recreation, tourism, a whole range of things. And so the point I'd like to take from this is that in the context of these projects, predator-free Arakiura is a globally significant project in terms of its scale and its application in an area where you've got an in situ population. So it's regionally important for Southland, nationally important for New Zealand, but it's actually globally important in terms of the scale and the cutting edge it's going to be working at. Thank you. If we could duck to the next one. And look, really, this is just a bit of a point about the why. And the simple reality is, if you look at the impact of these predator species on the biodiversity and the values of Arakiura that Rob was talking about before, but these predator species have a really significant impact. And so you wouldn't say at the moment, with those things being present, that the land is well. And in fact, co-chair Dean Whaonga basically characterised it as that the island from Ngāi Tahu's point of view is in the state of pōuri or sadness, in part because of the impact of these predator species on the wildlife. Thank you. Next. And I believe I'll hand it back to you, Rob.
Thanks, Campbell. Yeah, so what are the benefits and outcomes we're looking for? So here's some species here that I think can be restored and as to where they were before. The southern dotterel isn't the numbers are very poor at the moment, very low. We're concerned about that species. So that's one. The saddleback, obviously kiwi, that are there in numbers, but when you look at what's happening on Over Island, they can be there actually much bigger numbers as well. Gecko as well. We've got a photograph of a gecko somewhere in this chamber here. Pretty special harlequin gecko. Long-tailed bats, and the flora and fauna, of course, which is in great shape on the island. There's a lot of damage from possums and a number of other species. So obviously, it's going to be a real benefit to actually restore the fauna and flora of the island. That's a huge thing. The other thing that we're talking about and looking at the moment is carbon. We think there's pretty significant carbon benefits from if we're doing that pest control. There's a lot going on in field on at the moment, just trying to measure how much carbon is sequestered by those large lowland forests, and that could be quite significant and a potential income thoughts going forward if we can get that information, that evidence. And that would be really good to actually pretty valuable in terms of funding that maintenance control work and some initiative. Next slide, please. So what have we achieved so far? So we've got the project team running is underway, and they've built a strong partnership with Manaaki Whenua in terms of a research partnership. We're pretty clear that science and research are going to be a key for us going forward. So we've got a partnership negotiated with them where they bring quite a bit of money to the table, and we will also put in an investment in there to actually make that all go further. Working hard, very hard with Ngāi Tahu, just understanding their aspirations. So huge ownership in this project, and so getting them involved and doing work around articulating their aspirations. Doing a lot of work, Campbell and team, and also the trustees looking around the country, what's happening elsewhere. The other predator-free projects is a big one in Southwestern. There's a project there in the Perth catchment where Zip and Next have eradicated predators from one whole catchment. I think it's about 60,000 hectares. Campbell will correct me if I got the figure a little bit wrong, but it's a massive area. really tough terrain and they've achieved, they've got rid of rats and possums, and other predators in that area, which is quite significant, and people didn't think it could happen. We were very impressed. We went up and had a look. They're using AI cameras. So following a toxin operation, AI cameras pick up any recovery, and they can be like a team can go in there and control an area really quickly in a couple of days if they pop up. So it's quite an agile, different way of looking at them, but also realising some benefits that actually previously weren't through other things. So that's one example. Campbell's also been his experience in Hawke's Bay with some good projects up there, and we're connected to the Manahuna project in Canterbury. We're combined projects looking at eradicating suite of predators up in the Mackenzie Basin, and that includes rabbits. Which, if you said to me that you're looking to eradicate rabbits, I would have looked at them and thought you're right. They're making good progress, so we'll see. But it just they've turned to thinking on its head. The approach from next is it, so we're watching closely. And we're also doing a lot of work around, well, how do we take this project forward around funding? So we're looking at a funding partnership with a number of players at the moment. Doc will need to be a key player in this, and we're having constructive conversations with them, but also a range of other philanthropics to do the work. And at the moment, there's some work going on around a high level strategic plan as to actually how we would roll this out and use it as a part of our pack to attract investment. So that's Campbell might want to go into a little bit more detail if there's any interest in some of the work we're doing, but so some of the field work we're doing is around how do you, we've got hedgehogs in the list. What's the distribution of hedgehogs? We're doing some work around the eDNA. So we take a water sample and you can see what's in that catchment. And it's been some groundbreaking work from Victoria University that's now been rolled out around the country. I'm sure Environment Southland is using it. We're using it over there just to see what, there's no mice on the island that we know of, but we want to make sure there's no mice. And so one of the concerns is, because there's quite a high rat population, they suppress any mice that would be picked up. So we'll see what happens in the DNA. Yeah, was there anything else you want to touch on in that, just in a bit more detail? How are we going for time, Madam Chair?
You've got 7 minutes.
Cool. Maybe we'll click on, unless there's something real urgent, or there's any questions around this, around the work program?
That's Cook.
You know, there was some new.
No.
A number of not area councils the country whilst seen as predators of game.
So this is very much here are the key primary predators. Things might get built on in time, bolted on. We're looking at eradication, and I'm not sure there's any people to eradicate the wasps, but I'm sure we're going to need to control them in places to actually achieve the benefit. So, but it's one of those, what's the space type of thing.
Chairman Horrell?
Didn't see a deer on the list either. What part of these list, or was it more?
No, so deer aren't on the list. Well spotted. So predators, we're looking at we're aware that the deer are an issue, so we're working closely with the Deer Stalkers Association around how this project might impact on the numbers. It's around building that relationship so that we can have them on board without actually saying, actually they are a target species. They're not a target species. We're aware they'll have an impact. We just work closely with the Deer Stalkers opportunity to work this out. How do we manage this and keep everyone on board? Is the last.
You mentioned the work that's gone on the West Coast, but there's a bit of debate at the moment about gene editing technology, and in the past there's always been a concern that the tools available are going to make predator-free New Zealand quite difficult. Any thoughts on the trust? Have any thoughts on
The trust hasn't got any thoughts on it. I mean, we're aware that there's a lot of discussion at the moment in the political arena around the tools. I certainly personally wouldn't be arguing against that. We think it's realistic with the existing tools to eradicate things from Red Europe, but actually across NZ, it's a different story. So there's going to be a serious conversation around things like genetic and some of those things. There is some work going on in the what space. It's not gene technology, but it's it could be perceived as such around RNA, which is making a real difference. And there's some work with Middle Rust as well in the RNA space coming up with a tool that we can spray on things that actually, but it's not seen as gene technology. So, but we certainly need the conversation happening, and I think that's going to be that'll play out this year. Right, let's flick on to the next one, and we'll probably have some more discussion.
Yeah, I've got Councillor McFarlane, Councillor Evans, and Jen and Lyle, I can't even, no, you guys should. So we can come back to finish your presentation.
Yeah, so it's the next one. Yeah. So what's next? So as I've talked about the funding, we're just, how do we secure the funding for this long term? A key one for us is building community support. Ken, we might want to add on this, but it's community support's a key for us. We've got a lot of people that live there, they've got a strong view on their own, the whole of ownership. So having them on board is really important, and having them engaged is really important. So that community connection is something that Campbell has just been really strongly on. So being visible, having conversations, talking through some of the issues. This is a complex project, and people are so having people on board from the team. Not just on the island though, also there's a wider community that has a lot of ownership of Europe. And so having the future islands is a case in point. It's really important to have that support from them, but also the wider community. So it's all about people. And so having the people engaged, but also assisting the project. There's a whole lot of planning, funding, Maori mapping, community engagement, comms, that we're going to have a whole raft of people involved to take this forward. And so we need to have strong partnerships in place to do that. And it won't be easy, won't be straightforward, but we think it's very doable. And we think it'll be huge for NZ and also for Southland. Having a predator-free island this size on our back door is will be massive. So, Madam Chair, happy to take any questions and Campbell will chime in if I need any help.
Thanks, Councillor McFarlane.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Huge challenges. Well, I've just found out where a couple of islands are around the world as I'm doing the map and trying to work out. Obviously, the thing that stands out is obviously population. Close to population makes us probably a hell of a lot harder to do, and obviously you're going for everything, so it's really good pat on the back to look at this, and obviously if it can be achieved and working it out, it's going to be a big, certainly big asset for New Zealand and the locality. But then again, that brings those issues.
Yes, there's a whole lot of logistical issues around. Actually, we had to fly around the island looking at how much we might do things, and it's not going to be straightforward. But it's part of the challenge, and that's some good things going on as to how to do that.
Councillor Evans.
I think it's a very admirable project. You may have answered some of it regarding the community engagement. I was having a conversation with a friend that has key goals around pets and the SPCA in the Wellington area, and his ideology around pets was that they only deal with smaller, a great hazard to lizards. So with regards to cats, there's feral cats, of course. Community engagement would be to help us domesticate cats as well. With no mice, as you said, then are more likely to also predate the lizards and small bird life, which is a concern. Also, the area we're talking about is a wonderful catchment for a lot of floating debris coming onto Rakiura. A lot of predators killed could continue to come on, and it will be a long-standing project, no doubt. But not only just the community engagement, I think this is something really for regional as well as national. If we could initiate this right up to New Zealand, and see the government being proud of something like this to try and achieve this would be awesome.
Absolutely agree with all of the comments, and certainly it's a New Zealand Link project. You know, it's one of the priorities nationally, and so we're working closely with DOC and Predator Free 2050, the company, on this project. So they're closely involved. Cats are a huge issue for us, and a number of quite significant size cats that have trapped in some of those areas. You wouldn't believe, a very high population, and there's also been quite a history of discussions around cats at Oban. You might remember back in the day, about 6 years ago. I think there's been a lot of learnings out of that as to how to approach things, and the key learning is community engagement. And have those discussions early on is a key. Not to go on there and say, you know, we want to get rid of these cats and but all of these things. So look, feral cats are a huge issue, and we need to recognise that. That community engagement in that process is going to be crucial, otherwise they will fall.
So there's no issues with states or ferrets or anything like that. There's been nothing cool.
No, so rats,
and it's good at least there's one already not there.
Yes,
two.
You know, and that's the key. I mean, that's pretty significant for us.
Councillor Pemberton.
Yeah, probably Shillong's a pretty popular destination for a lot of Southland people and visitors. How do you guys envisage like the private boats going across and such like that? Actually quite
So part of the operational, our strategic plan that we're looking at the moment is doing something like that biosecurity. How do we manage that pathway between Bluff and the mainland and other places rather than being elsewhere in the country, and Rathura, and we will be having some conversations with the council about that. Looking to, is there a pathway plan that we could explore? I know there's been some early conversations about that. So that part of it's going to be crucial to actually securing the benefits and that will follow on too. So as well as the cameras on the island, pick up any little blind areas that pop up. Also, that boundary is going to be crucial for managing the approach and policy. There's been a bit of work done on the Chathams. On Canterbury was involved in around some protocols, just at harbours and those type of things. At Bluff, what might happen in terms of just checking that there's no mice on this, whatever. But these are things that we're going to work through. So biosecurity is going to be a crucial part of securing the benefits. The other part of securing the benefits is also getting long-term commitment from the Crown, if you like, in terms of them. And so this work will get work done, but then there's a lot ongoing work around maintaining. So
that'll be a big challenge.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just quickly from me, I'm assuming that one of the funding partners that you're wanting to negotiate with would perhaps be further support from us, but I'm not volunteering that. I'm just asking if that's what you're asking. And wondering if you're intending on coming across during the LTP process to see.
I haven't briefed your chief executive on this stage, so I should correct you. We're looking to raise $4 to $5 million from the region, from South, not from necessarily from South, but from South and we're just about looking to having a conversation here between all of the funding partners and also some philanthropic. So I know there's just maybe a foundation formed recently. And we're having some conversations with them around, what might they contribute. So no, I'm not coming with any preconceived ideas around, right, we're going to squeeze $500,000 out of I do understand the challenges of funding at the moment. I will understand them. So yeah, we'll be talking to you and probably looking for that possibility. But we'll have a conversation and shape it up.
Sure. Thank you. Any other questions? Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Phillips. Nice to see you in the chamber. Would somebody like to move that update? Thank you, Councillor McPhail, seconded Councillor Morrison. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye, against, carried. On the happy note, I think we'll break for lunch. Could we be back by 10 to 1, please? That gives you 30 minutes, just under. Yes, Ms. Book.
I'm the chair of the So Councillor McDonald has left, and now with Councillor Cook going to have a quorum. You just make it up.
Just going to oh, let's make it 1:45.
Yes.
Yeah, 1:45, please.
Then, assuming that's all successful, the next step will be to workshop that with these councillors. We've got a workshop penciled in for the 9th of August. And that the idea is that each agency does that individually with the workshopping with their own councillors. And that we then come back and bring that feedback into the interagency space. And hopefully that means that we'll be on track towards the end of the year to create that regional climate change strategy. The second thing from the item today is the fact that from the most recent climate change subcommittee meeting, there was going to be a workshop scheduled this afternoon focusing on climate change communications and at the same time the youth mechanism for engagement. So there may still be a touch on that this afternoon, but otherwise if that doesn't get progress today, that will be progressed at that 9th of August workshop as well. And because we were prepared for today, there is a lot of background work that's been done on it, so we will definitely be prepared for the 9th of August. And the third thing that was in the report was the climate change perception survey. Now that was an idea that came out of the climate change subcommittee, that we run this survey with councillors from each agency as a cohort to find out where councillors are at. And so we put this to the interagency group and to gauge whether there's a level of support, which there was. And so staff have been working on making sure that that's all ready to go, hopefully within the next week or so that'll be released. So it's just going through the final stages of approval at the moment. The thing is, it'll be going to each of the 4 councils. So that's quite a small cohort. So it will be critical to make sure that everyone participates in that survey for that to have any validity, which hopefully you all will. So just a heads up on that. They were the main things to highlight from the report today.
Any questions? Just one from me regarding the next steps. I'm assuming that the councillor level survey, governance level survey, is also a test for its usability and user friendliness and all that stuff. So will there be opportunities for us to feedback about that aspect as well as the actual content?
Absolutely. We did pilot the survey internally and took on a lot of internal feedback on that, and that was like a proper pilot. Hopefully it's refined to the degree that it's going to be a much better survey now this time going out to councillors, but if there is any feedback on that, then there's definitely going to be scope to still refine it further. The idea is that it gets rolled out to the community sometime in the coming months, once we are satisfied after the councillor survey is done.
Cool. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Wairau?
Yes, to the meeting next week, then, will we have something, something that we can get our teeth into regarding the organisational emissions reduction pathway?
For the interagency meeting you're talking about?
Yeah, the one next week.
The Thursday, which is the regional climate change interagency meeting.
So no.
That will be focused on the principles and aspirations, and the agenda will be out for that on Monday. The organisational emissions reduction, the timing of that is that the baseline should hopefully be completed sometime in July. We've chosen this financial year as the baseline year, so that means we can't kind of wrap it up until this financial year actually finishes. So that means sometime in July it will be the earliest that we'll get that finalised. And then we're just still working on options as to whether we are able to quickly step through a verification process, which will give us confidence in the figures, or whether we'll just kind of like start working with it as it is. So depending on the timing of when that verification is possible. So hopefully we'll definitely be able to give an update on that at that August 9th workshop, which will be like basically the whole climate change portfolio will be workshop that day is the intention.
Yeah, our baseline gas emissions profile will have something to do with that too, right?
Yeah, so our baseline emissions profile will then provide a lot of, it's like a foundation to be able to direct what our reductions will need to look like and what's achievable and what's, you know, what's the reward. Yeah.
Councillor Evans.
Just carrying on from that, so the to develop and implement emission action plans to reduce council greenhouse gas emissions, council and communities. So business within community currently are looking at calculating tools to calculate their emissions. They're emitters, the other portion to the carbon forestry thing. And because that'll be the next step or progression through this whole process, where if you're going to be paying out for trees getting planted, you've got to get that money from somewhere. That money from somewhere is emitters. We are the emitters, business, industry. So there will be a calculation tool coming out somewhere along the line the government will want to run with. Have we got any indication from central government how we can calculate what we are actually creating as a commission? Because there will be a monetary charge at some stage in the future. I'm thinking of that as a realist, and this will have to have payments one way and the other, extraction the other. So, is there any indication from government on which way we need to be on how we calculate it?
So the calculations at the moment for our organisation, for example, we're using the MFE guidelines as the starting point, and then the purpose of getting verification will be testing the validity of that. But there is definitely a situation where it's one of, we're having lots of conversations with our partner agencies, for example, to talk around what where our organisations align in terms of the boundary and who's counting what and things like that, so that we're not double counting and all that kind of thing. But it's very much a situation where we're learning as we go. In that context, there's also a lot of direction coming down nationally to saying that that's not ideal, and we need to keep working on trying to get to some stage where we've got methodology that's a lot more consistent. So there's quite a few councils that are working together on that at the moment to create a tool specifically that's more on the regional emissions side of things rather than the organisational thing. But the organisational aspect of it will be part of that as well. Area where lots of people are learning, it's a big learning
To
curve.
continue on from that, some industries are already counting their waste. It's per tonne. They're already counting the fuel usage, already calculating all of these as measures to calculate where their emissions are as carbon credits, as created.
Sorry, councillor, I'm going to interrupt you because that's actually a really good conversation, but it might be best suited for the workshop.
Okay.
Because that's all things that we probably need to discuss. Is it 9th of August? Yeah, 9th of August workshop. Unless you need an urgent response.
No, it's just that it says here in the line that to develop and implement ambitious action plans to reduce council greenhouse gas emissions and support council and community resilience. Now, I just wanted to get a guess, or as Morris was saying, a baseline of where we're at currently and compared to commercial activities around New Zealand currently with other industries.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
And final comment on that through the chair is the situation is with the baseline, it's even though you might have calculations for 1 year, it will take 2 or 3 years at least before you kind of really land on a baseline because there's an element of refinement that needs to happen over those years. And as national methodology may improve, it should be relatively straightforward to then modify and adapt once you've got that baseline established, and businesses and councils and anybody that's doing these sorts of calculations should be able to adapt to align once you're on that pathway. So that helps provide a little bit of context that even though it might not be a situation where alignment's easy at the moment, it's something that should be able to be worked towards.
Thanks. Okay, Peter, did you have a question?
Well, it's just you're just following on from that, and look, I might be leaping ahead too, but will we start to look at it through our procurement and the way we procure contractors too, and start to be insisting in time that they follow these procedures too? Is that where it naturally goes, and sort of that tier 3 reporting, like everything above us and everything below us too? Is that where this will naturally head? Just a quick comment would be quite good.
Yes, because the whole food chain has to be accountable. So absolutely.
But my comment to that would be Environment South and ideally needs to work on walking the talk in the space.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at as an organisation.
Thanks. Okay. So I'd like to move that report be noted. Thank you, Councillor Morrison, Councillor Rodway, seconder. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Thanks, okay. Right, we will zip through to item 9, please, which is the presentation from the New River Estuary Forum. Pleasure to welcome Jane, Sarah and Richard to the table on another lovely Southland day. I think it is out there, I'm not sure. Shush. So with that, I'll hand over to whoever's going to start you off. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having us today. I think first of all, probably introduce who we are in the room. I'm so called Jane Kitson-Aho. Jane Kitson, I live right next to the estuary, about a paddock away. Paddock away from where used to be our Pātiki flounder Mahinga Kai spot, and no longer is because of issues there. And hence I have joined the core group of the New River Estuary Forum.
Hi, I'm Sarah Thorne. Some of you know me through my work with the Mid and Lower Reti catchment groups. I'm here in a personal capacity because I am passionate about the marine environment and I've got a real soft spot for estuaries.
I'm Richard Kite. I've been involved with the New River Estuary Forum since it started. It came out of catchment group for looking at an urban view around catchments and what that looked like. And yes, I say I've been involved since the start of the project, and it's evolved since then. And I think we've spoken to the council
Yes, I think it's brilliant to say this. Since it's the change.
Oh, that's just serious.
I think the fourth member of our committee who couldn't make it today and sends her apologies is MP Liz Craig. So I promise to pass that on. So today, can I press the button down, Rachel?
Yes, if you're having any problems, I'll jump up.
It's a bit high maintenance, our system, so just bear with it.
Yeah.
That should work, although you've got to put it in just the right spot.
Oh, and I had my tongue out, so. Thank you. So I click here. Oh, look at that. So this is the journey we'd like to take you on today. I'm going to cover a bit about what the New River Estuary Forum is and what we've done in the past. I'll then hand over to Jane, who will talk about the linkages and the values and the current state of the estuary, so the present, and then we'll pass it on to Richard, who'll do the future and the next steps. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to ask them of us now or later on through ourselves or through Rachel. So the New River Estuary Forum was formed in 2018, and right from the start, it was a community collective. It is a passionate group of individuals and different groups that really care about New River Estuary and want to see it looked after and its health improved. So we've got people like me that come along with our I'm there as me, but I've got some great linkages through work, through to restoration groups like the Otara Landcare Group. Rotary's been a strong part of it. We have catchment group members come along. We have mana whenua. We have people who just walk their dogs or are keen naturalists, love the bird life, whatever. But we're not a rural group. We're not an urban group. We're all of that. And I should say that the whole of the committee is voluntary. We've got funding once, and I'll bring that up a bit later on from Great South for a specific project. And I think the infographic that Jane has done here really sums up what we are. We're all about communication, collaboration, and finding those connections. That's a huge part of what we do and how we work. And so if you ever want to see us summed up in a nutshell, this is a great way to do it. We acknowledge that there's a whole pile of fantastic work that goes on in the estuary space already, and we don't want to double up and do that. That is fantastic. We're all about providing that community connection, community voice, finding the gaps and helping to fill them. So this is just taking a step back. This is not you talking about the estuary. This is a flyer from 1972 from the Southland Acclimatisation Society. It's amazing. It talks about all the wonderful things that Southland estuaries are. But on it, it already brings up in 1972 the problems with refuse, industrial waste, land reclamation and sewage. And it has a call to action for the generations there and then to take action, to stop talking about it, to start doing. So what have we done? So this is what we've done to date. We started in 2018, very much how we mean to go on with a community meeting. And our community said, yes, we want you to exist. This is what we think we'd like you to look at. This is why we're here. That morphed into some fantastic workshops to work out our strategic direction. A lot of meetings, a lot of connections with Environment Southland and Invercargill City Council. We asked a specific set of questions to Environment Southland. And at the same time this was going on, we were also asked to approach the medical officer of health, because people were concerned about, will they get sick if they touch the mud or they swam there or they ate kai moana from there. And we got some responses back, they were great, but there was also quite a lot of gaps and a few sketchy ones. And then in 2020, COVID hit. So we had that face-to-face stuff that we still do, but now we've also gone online. We have Zooies, my new word, I love it, and Huies. We developed this very specific piece of work called the Gateway Murihiku Project, and that's what Great South funded. They gave us funding, and we hired the wonderful Bridget Aitken to be our project manager in that. And I'm going to cover that next. Amongst all of this, we kind of were interviewed by the Parliamentary Commissioner for Environment team. That was a fantastic process. It is a really sick estuary. It's degrading incredibly fast, was the outcome of that, one of the worst in New Zealand. But we also met some really cool people on the way, like Keith Calder from Pororua. And his point was, You know, we turned our back on the estuary. We are a city next to an estuary that is an internationally recognised wetland site. When you go down there, you see the sewage treatment works, you see on the street with all the industry. So this is one of my favourite projects to date, and this was us. It was all about reconnecting the people of Invercargill with the estuary. It was all about creating a gateway to Murihiku and Southland that they'd be proud of. And through it, there was a sort of formal consultation process with online surveys and paper ones. But one of my favourite things was we formed this great connection with Otatara School, and they were fabulous. They took it on as a whole of school project. They did science investigations. They did site visits. They got people in to talk to them about the estuary. They learned about catchments. They wrote some stories and poems that actually I get quite tearful about when I read them, because they're just fabulous. There was artworks, there was murals, and this was all part of our He Wakatuia exhibition that we had there. And they actually came and spoke at that as well. We did. We had Notahu Kaumatua Michael Skerritt come and talk about his connection to the estuary. We had Jane talk about the current state, and then we had Gillian Donnelly and the students talk about what they believed and, you know, what they'd like to see happen there. And this is some of the photos from there. There's Michael there. And through all doing this, that went amazingly well. We carried on with the meetings. The awareness of our group has been raised. This is Jane speaking at the Oriti bus trip that the catchment groups organised, and they wanted to start at the estuary, and they wanted then to travel up the catchment, seeing what good work has been done. This is me stuck in the mud about 5 metres on the edge of the estuary. I knew I was going to get stuck, and the Doc Argo was there to pull me out. We were doing the good, the bad, and the ugly tour to see the great stuff, not so good stuff down the estuary. This is some of the science investigations by Otatara School, and a picture of one of the walls of the display museum. But that last slide with the sort of little leaves on was a really fabulous part of the consultation. People could take it off the wall, and it said, "I remember, you know, as our estuary with the beautiful birds." And then people could pick the next one. Now our estuary is, and people said it's sad, unhappy, sick, oily, full of rubbish. And then we want the estuary to be, and it was often responses like happy, healthy, a great place to be. So I shall hand over to Jane. Would you like to swap seats?
Oh, no, it's all right. We don't need to move. Okay. So a lot of work, and a lot of work we can't actually put on photos because it's really boring because we're sitting in meetings and that kind of thing. And a lot of it has been with engagement with the community and a wider forum group. So every step we've gone back to that forum group, and they've helped develop it going forward. And so as part of that process, I think it was as early as April 2019, we started looking at what kind of work programs were required for the estuary as a community, kind of thinking of what bits are happening and what needs to be connected. Because obviously this is a big issue and requires lots of people, a lot of people involved, and so recognising that, and you can't conquer all of it as a sort of one forum of connection, but also recognising that to tackle the estuary, you need to do a lot of different things. And so this neat little picture came out from a workshop that started at Murihiku Marae, and it went through in different forum group meetings. And so we recognise there's a lot of actions happening upstream, a lot's happening through here, and a lot with our other catchment groups further upstream. And we do connect with them and talk to them, and also have field trips, going to the estuary and also going up further up. So we recognise that that's happening, and that we need to be connected to that. And there's other aspects of like remediation, and which I imagine that's gone through the council, some of the reports that have gone through there, looking at those aspects. Biodiversity and ecosystem health, people like catchment groups, land care group at Otatara, doing marvellous work in that space, people collecting up rubbish, those kind of components. Public health pretty much relates to everything, so that's also a big driver for a lot of these things as well. You've got your sewage and stormwater, but that's through a consenting process, and are recognising that the sewage treatment plant will be reconsented in 2029. So stuff is happening in that space. But what we sort of figured, and that's why that golden halo over Old Landfill and sort of like
not usually imagined as something with a golden halo.
You're looking at and potentially it could be a wonderful place. It's quite expensive in all of those aspects. But there's a gap in action here, and an issue. And so I'll highlight some of those issues too. And I imagine it's already come past you as well. You'll be all over the top of this. You'll know this, but I'll just remind you of that. And so that's part of where our focus. Where can we be the most useful? Recognising that we want to connect with everyone, and there's a lot of mahi going on in the space. And so lots of values of this estuary, and these pictures only capture some of it. A huge amount of kai in there. That's my son holding a brown trout he's been catching from the estuary just down the road, well, just down the hill from us, really. Lots of biodiversity aspects. Also, part of our city is facing that estuary. A lot of recreation. I'm fortunate to live in Ototara, and right next to all that wonderful sandy point, heaps of stuff goes on there. You see white baiters in there, you see people fishing, you see people with nets. Sometimes we get yellow-eyed mullet, flounder, pataki. Probably wouldn't eat the tuaki, but they're there. Huge amount of cultural values, and I'm not going to go into that so much because that requires a longer discussion, and with the mana whenua representatives you have. But I mean, it's actually recognised. The river, there's places kainga, all of those components of it. Wakaama is a big thing, and also as our rowing clubs there too. So a lot of stuff on the water requires connection to the water. Now, with looking at state, now these are all reports that have come to ES, so you guys will be all over this as well. You know about landfall and the old landfall, and that what last things, unregulated things ended up in that space, including the old former gas works site. And it's also leachate from landfill has elevated heavy metals, and all sorts of other lovely things like fecal coliforms, other heavy metals, PAHs, sort of hydrocarbon type components, nitrogen, and very high amount of nitrogen. You'll be aware of that as well as yours. Memo. And there are likely other contaminants. This was the E3's scientific report that went to the ES in 2019, and that was quite alarming with what came out, what could be there that we don't know about, like things like cyanide, sort of strikes little alarm bells, sulfides, boron, things I can't actually say, and acronyms that are all over the place. So it's and asbestos. So all of those things could be there, could be leaching out, and an issue in there. So you've got a lot of reports highlighting that there could be quite significant human health issues and obviously ecosystem health issues. So you know that, ES knows that, you guys know that there's issues here, and that's quite alarming, being right next to human settlement, but also where people actually recreate and are part of. And if you go down there, you can actually see it. So people don't need to know what those words mean, but you can see it coming out. You can see the leachate, you can see the rubbish, you can see those aspects of it. And so that state is actually a barrier to use, barrier to values, a barrier to values are really highly valued by people. That's why people care about the estuary. That's why they've always been worried about the estuary. And you will also be well aware that of this climate change risk assessment, because that's through the work that ES has been doing, and how high at risk that is for climate change and all those different factors in there. So an extreme risk of all the factors, flooding, river scale, coastal edge proximity, and coastal inundation.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, so I suppose it's kind of the issues that are there, we're all aware of them. And New Estuary Forum is also aware that it's not a simple issue, and it's not a quick fix. And actually on the way here in the car, I was listening to national radio, and Dunedin City Council were looking at their landfill, and they're talking about it's going to cost 50 million into the future. They're facing the sea. Our landfill is not facing the sea; it's facing our estuary, and I don't think the sea isn't the solution to the issue. But with that, contaminants are leaking into the estuary. People collecting the hana kai there. The work around that kind of falls in a gap between yourselves and Invercargill City Council. When we went to Public Health, they said, "Well, how big's the problem? We don't know. The monitoring wasn't there." And
with all due, with all due conscience, actually looking at that and saying, we know there's an issue, we know there's, we don't know exactly what it is, but we don't want to see paralysis by analysis. It's about time that things started to move. Going back to the first, so going back to the first slide, 1972. We're 50 years down the track, and we've just watched that happen. And if this was to happen again, we'd now be 100 years down the track, and I don't know that we'd have an estuary to talk off. So I suppose we're talking about next steps. We're talking about actually doing something. It's I suppose it's beholden to this generation to start making a change. You look at the first and foremost, public health, that needs to be addressed quickly, because we can't, something comes up in the next 10 years and we sit here and say, oh, well, yeah, we did know about that, but we didn't do anything. So that's really important that we address that for those who use the estuary and those who take kai from and feed from the estuary. And as I say, it's what are the next steps? It's easy to say we'll have another look, we'll dig some more bores. I think the evidence is there that there's an issue. What needs to happen depends on the size of that issue. And I suppose the new directory forum's here because nobody else is in this space saying we need to actually move and make change. As the other issues in the estuary are being addressed, if we don't address this, it's going to be, say, it could be 100 years down the track, and the health issues from that. And so we're here today, I suppose, to say to the time that we started making moves, that positive moves that actually start creating a change and even understanding. So from the engineering point of view, what would that look like? What are remediations, taking into account the long-term plan, the annual plan? We know we've got climate change coming. If we don't start now, you say, well, the future generations will look at us and say, well, you actually knew for 50 years and you didn't move. So that's...
Okay, so we'll talk about the future generations, and I've got permission from some members of our future generation, because we worked with Otatara Stoll, and they actually infused the estuary into all their sort of work programs and work programs, they're not quite that level, into their learnings and lessons throughout the school year last year for the senior school. And so they're already questioning why didn't you stand up for the estuary? They're already questioning our generation about an action. And they also see a future where we're facing the estuary, a part of the estuary, and connected to the estuary again without being afraid of the estuary. And I was very want to bring to mind that at their Polyfest at their haka that they presented, it was a Ngaitahu haka, which actually was a challenge about the estuary. They were challenging the next generation, the councils, the regulatory authorities, not that they would use that term, but people in charge, to actually do something, to work with their community to make it better. So it's a better place, a healthier place where they can get kai, a place where they can connect with the environment, and the environment is healthy. So I thought it was important to acknowledge and end our talk about the next generation. So there is expectations of them, high expectations, and actually high knowledge about this estuary as well. Been blown away by what they have understood, what their learnings, and how quickly they've been able to connect quite complex realities and complex issues together. And so I suppose with that in mind, the future generation, and from what our wishes and desires are also from our community, being a voice of that aspiration is to actually have action on this issue. We know this issue is here. Can we work together to move on doing some action?
Yes. Kia ora team, thank you very much. Questions, councillors? Councillor Rodway?
Yes, thank you very much for that. I talked to the current mayor about the problem with the leachate from the old landfill. He said to me that, yes, well, he recognises it's a problem, and what we need to do is put some chute piling around it, like they're putting in along the Dunks Road there, and they'll fix the problem. but I'm not sure it's quite that simple, but at least he's aware of it, and maybe the city council, is also cost, but maybe there's some work that could be done there to investigate how it can be done with the city council. Is that something in
We are asking you to work with the city council in this space.
I'm not sure positive feedback?
We have been talking to the city council. Yeah. We're also coming here as you're at the regulatory authority as well in this space.
I think it needs to be combined approach to it, or with the CAN, playing tennis with the CAN over the net. So it's it needs a combined approach between the years and the cable systems to drive this forward.
Councillor Morrison.
Thank you for this presentation, and I recall when the regional forum visited this challenge, and I recall Fiona Smith with her knowledge of how AB Line manages the dump or the out there at Winton, what do we call it? It's not waste. She kind of shook her head and said, if you were to ever wanting to remediate that site, you'd have to assume that everything in there is the worst possible kind of stuff. And that would be really hugely expensive to relocate that and contain it in accordance with modern expectations. And I remember we left with the sense that this is possibly the biggest, thorniest water quality challenge that Southland has. And it was certainly probably going to be beyond the 20 to 25 year time frame to get the outcome. You mentioned suggest that adage that if you want to travel fast, travel alone, but if you want to travel far, travel with many. I think perhaps in this case we need to find the fact that this is going to be a long-term journey. We need to not only enlist capacity and enlist support in our lines, but to continue to build a talent pipeline so that we can pass the torch between members as people grow tired or need to take a break from that work. So I really endorse the idea of working together and but taking a very long-term perspective that, there's probably no single silver bullet solution. You've got a whole bunch of people with the best ideas possible all the time. Would that kind of align with your thinking, or?
We realise it's a long-term project, but it's about initiating and starting and having some action around it. It's the long-term. In 1972, they sort of the long-term issue, and it still, but it hasn't changed. So it's about acting and working with understanding what that looks like, and from an engineering perspective, what are the options, and we understand, the cost. Will probably be considerable around it, but if we don't start moving on that, we're not going to improve anything.
It's only going to get more expensive, isn't it?
Yeah. And I suppose I'll add to what Richard in the sense that it has been enduring. So I've actually lived with I'll go away about how many decades, but there was a working group on the estuary then. So, but that obviously fell apart. So it's also realising that this process, whatever happens, we want action, but we want enduring action. And these kids want enduring action as well. So it's those kinds.
Rachel, did you want to introduce?
I was just going to note that we do have staff member from the Cable City Council here as well, and just the fact it's noted in the agenda item that there have been conversations at a staff level, and in the coming annual plan there has been provision made by both agencies within existing budgets to fund a scoping study for the next financial year, which would then inform long-term plan processes going forward.
Can I just say, I think Councillor Morrison's choice of words was spot on. People are talking about remediation with this estuary anymore. We're not talking restoration. It is, I was at the ACE event on Friday, and it is the red line of the worst estuary in Southland. Every dot was red, which was poor, apart from one little blue one, and I pointed out how lucky they were. They have a 720 hectare estuary. This is 4,100 hectares, 1,600 hectares, and that's already been taken and reclaimed, changing how it flushes. It is one of the most degraded estuaries in Invercargill, and our next generation recognises that. And you can have the whole paralysis by analysis. We can keep looking, we can keep monitoring. The catching groups always say that, we can always find out more, but there's actions they know they can take and people can do. We've had Fiona Smith talk to us about leachate. Right now it's trucked down to Clifton, they're trying to trial a dehydrator. There's lots of actions we could be putting in place that we know will have a positive effect. My work with the catching groups is how I feel I link into that as well, to turn the tap off a bit further up. So we can have meetings, then have another 6 months and have another meeting, but that's what we've been caught in, I'd say, for the last 6 years as a cycle. So it's really that brave step into action that needs to happen.
So I guess my question then is, well, there are many, I've got many questions. So what mechanisms have we got, existing mechanisms have we got that we can start more proactively leveraging off? And also, without wanting to go down the big black hole that can be local government, do we need to set up another mechanism to drive this particular work? I mean, I'm interested in what you know, how you see that, because somebody's ultimately got to take the step, and who do you see that being?
We do see someone having to lead because you need champions, and we do have community champions here, so absolutely joining on that. I suppose when we first started, we had Kevin Older, some people, Kevin or Keith, can't remember what it was, Keith, from Kororoa, and they have a program around their estuary, and so they did a lot of work and they made a really great implementation plan, in the sense that they actually started people looking at the estuary, and that's where our driver for the Gateway in Motueka is, people actually realising it's on their doorstep, that they're actually a coastal city. And they have done a lot of work in that space. I mean, we're a voluntary group, so we can't do that kind of thing, but they actually made their lessons learned in that program. And we were quite, I suppose, buoyant about after seeing him and talking to him and about that program and how they've actually become, the first job they did was actually take rubbish out of the estuary, because people were just saying it's a dump. And then they started putting their shop prices to the estuary, those kind of things, and then schools, and they have interpretation. So it's that's the enduring part, and then we're tackling an issue that people were willing to invest in long term, and that's where that Motueka Gateway Motueka thing was, just actually getting people there to be
somebody.
And there needs to be
pointy bit,
there needs to be funding behind it, because we've done it voluntarily and we've struggled, and as soon as the fund, you know, when we had funding out of Great South, made a massive difference, and we moved so quickly. As soon as that's disappeared, everybody's got day jobs, and nothing happens, and it is very intense. The number of people that are associated with the estuary and engaged and need to be engaged is far greater than we can do on our own. So it does need investment in moving forward.
Okay. Final question. Thanks, Councillor.
So ultimately, with anything that's affecting the downstream, it's the causes, the tap, as you say, upstream. I remember a conversation with a friend who was participating in a race down here. I can't remember what it was, going down the Ariti, and he could tell where things changed. And one of them was, in his words, the Makareva. So, you know, you've got a lot of causes or taps. And part of those fall under our regulations. What are the top couple that we need to really focus on to improve that, the top couple of causes upstream? What do we need to focus on?
Well, I suppose that's the work program you've already got, and so we're focusing on landfill, because we're assuming that you guys have got everything else covered.
No,
yeah. Maybe in another process, but because we are going to focus on this particularly, because our assumption that is sort of you guys have got the other stuff covered, and we're not going to. Otherwise, we're keeping an eye, but otherwise we're not going to go there. But realising that's really important, absolutely, and you guys, as an organisation, have a strong role in that space, as do the community groups that are working in that space too. But yeah, so for us, the gap was that landfill, the old landfill, that aspect, that problem that's been here for quite a long time and still is a problem.
Thanks very much. Peter, have you got a question?
Well, of course I have. That first trip we took down a few years ago, the council bus trip down to the estuary, I was shocked. We got out of the bus and here there was ladies walking together, people walking dogs, people biking over the leachate that was oozing out of that site. And it didn't look a good colour to me, a turquoise colour. We were assured that that was organic waste by someone, but people were going about their own business blissfully unaware of that. And it made quite an impact on me. And actually, we need to get past this thing at the moment, which is none of the councils want to talk to each other for the fear of being asked to pay for something. We see it all the time now. We've got to start doing this and approaching the Invercargill City Council. And I go back to what Jane said, we can't unknow this for the future. There's going to be questions asked of us. Why didn't we do something? We can't say we didn't know because we do know. So I think the whole context of this has changed now with the constrictions on upper catchment activities in regard to farming. We've seen the constrictions come in and intensive wood grazing and all these sorts of things. So I think we're turning the tap off from contaminants in the upper catchment. Now I think it's time that we start to do something big together, as Phil said, in the estuary itself. So that's just more, and we congratulate the forum on the work you've done in keeping it going around that engagement. It's been really good. So good on you.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you, team. You know you have listening ears here, and I'm going to break my own rules, and I'm not going to ask you a question. I'm going to tell you that the Southland Art Foundation has an exhibition upstairs in the Invercargill City development that has an artist's impression of the estuary and the Otapuni Gardens. So if you have not been up there, I suggest you do, because Kyla Creston's work is absolutely beautiful, and the audiovisual work from Otapuni, from David Wells, is also so spot on interpretation of all of those magical things that are magical, not the not so magical. So thanks very much, Nami. Nami, thank you very much for coming. Somebody like to move the receipt of that update, please? Thanks, Councillor Morrison, seconded Councillor Evans. All those in favour, please say aye. Thanks, carried. Thank you. And Nick, finally, we are at item 4, which is the science update. And as I said, 104. As I said earlier in the day, can we please now really keep to questions, because it's without wanting to stifle, debate, it's getting on. And we'll, Nick, if you want to get started, and they'll magic. Thank you.
Thanks for having me today. Well, in case you don't know me, my name is Nick Talbot. I am the team lead for the air quality and terrestrial team in science. I think I've met most of you now by now. And today I'm talking about the new emission inventory air quality reports that have just been released now by Environet on our behalf. Just doing a quick presentation on the key findings. Okay. There we go. So just a brief introduction. Why do we care about air? Obviously, we breathe in all the contaminants that we release. And actually, just looking at the forum presentation, a lot of the contaminants that were actually listed there, the box of horrors, is actually also present in small numbers within the air that we breathe. The rule of thumb here, I'll be brief, is the fact that we have different particulate sizes. We start at PM10, which is about a fifth of the width of our hair, a strand of hair. This is when we start to get interested, because we can actually breathe in that size of particulate. Once we get to PM2.5, which is a quarter of that size, it can enter our lungs. PM1, it can pass through the lungs and get through towards the alveoli, which is our exchange rate. If we go to 0.01, which is a about 500 nanometers to 100 nanometers. We call it ultrafine. That can actually get into our bloodstream and get through to our major organs. So basically, the smaller the particle, the more hazardous it is, more likely there's to be acute issues rather than just, chronic issues rather than acute. Also, the contaminants that we release as we call air pollutants are also generally greenhouse gases. So they'll also contribute to climate issues. So if we start to look after our air quality issues, we'll also start to address climate issues as well. The two are not separated away. I like this rather simple diagram, but it's quite nice. We break it into two different sources of emissions. We either have natural sources, which tend to derive from frictional mechanical forces. They tend to be larger particles, tend to be in the PM10 range. We're interested in the ones that we can control, which is basically from anthropogenic or man-made emissions. And you can see here that industrial, traffic, outdoor burning, home heating, there's one thing in common. They're all combustion related. Combustion particles tend to be in PM2.5 and smaller range, which means they are more hazardous and largely to do with our behavior. Where there's a lot of people, there's a lot of activity, and we tend to create our own pollutants and amounts that become troublesome. We monitor two air sheds here in Invercargill. It's Pomona Street in Invercargill and also on Main Street in Gore. And these are actually our concentrations that are monitored in real time. And we have quite good data sets, as you'll see shortly. So on to the nitty-gritty. This is the third emission inventory. Now, the emission inventory gives us the emissions. We're looking here at just man-made emissions from combustion processes. And as it's the third, we've had one in 2011, one in 2015, and this one just released using data up to 2022. Now, as the emissions is basically, as you were saying, in tons and kilograms, and so this is the amount of emissions that released into the air sheds that we got. So you can see here that since 2011, our man-made PM10 emissions have decreased by an estimated 70%. Wood burners are still used by 35% of households in Invercargill, this is, and 25% of that 35% still use them as the main heating source. 81% preference electric heating methods these days. 1/3 of the wood burners used in Invercargill are quite new, less than 5 years old. And multi-fuel burners have decreased rapidly over the last few years, the amount of them. And about 144 tons of wood and 5 tons of coal are burnt per typical winter's night in Invercargill. So this is the amount of emission per night that's actually getting into our air. So what does that mean for our actual concentration? So the Pomona Street site, which this data actually comes from, shows us that the amount of exceedances from the National Environmental Standard, which allows up to 50 micrograms per cubic meter over a 24-hour period. You can see here, these bars actually represent a 5-year average of concentrations. You can see from 2009 to 2013 period, we had 18 days when we exceeded that 50 micrograms per cubic meter, I should say, limit set by the NES, which is quite a few. You can see the most recent, 2018 to 2022, we've had an average over those periods of 6 exceedances. So far this year, if you're interested, we've had 2 exceedances. We've had 2 in the 40s, very close. So we are appearing to decline in the amount of concentrations that we're monitoring, but we're still exceeding the 2004 NES guidelines. For Gore, similar results actually. Since 2011, PM10 emissions in Gore have decreased by an estimated 64%. More than 1/3 of wood burners used in Gore are less than 5 years old. About 30 tons of wood and 6 tons of coal per night in Gore. And we see here that the amount of exceedances over these same 5-year periods, and we can actually see here we have a longer data set for Gore, so we go back to 2006 to 2010. So the average between those 5 years, we had 7 exceedances on average between those 5 years. Most recently, 2018 to 2022, in that period, we've had an average of 1 exceedance. The last couple of years, we have had no exceedances at all in Gore. This year, we still haven't had an exceedance so far. Looking at this more generally, this press release from LAWA was released this week. The headline was New Zealanders are breathing clearer air, but further improvements would make a difference to our nation's health. Reading into this article, 66% of all sites across the Motu have actually experienced a decrease in concentrations, and we are part of that 66%, which is encouraging. There's work to do because we are looking now to meet old standards from 2004. It's worth noting that newer standards based on the recent World Health Organization are likely to be more stringent for PM10 and will also include PM 2.5, which we are not likely to be meeting at the moment. So further work will be required. And just to conclude, decreasing trends in PM10 emissions and concentrations are evident in both Invercargill and Gore airsheds since 2011, the first emission inventory. The same trend has been reported across Aotearoa by LAWA very recently. However, like most other regions across the country, Southland is still not meeting current standards, and upcoming national changes to these national standards are going to impose stricter limits.
Thanks, Nick. Any questions? Councillor Fowle?
Yeah, that's sort of a good story. It's going the right direction. But as you say, things might get a little bit tougher. They change the guidelines, but just a quick question. Climate change, getting warmer winters. So the expectations are probably less heating. In a way, there will be, you know, like we know on a farm, I know our climate has changed quite dramatically in the winter. But you know, does that reflect on that we're seeing less exceedances? But is it because there's less? There has to be a wee bit in there that would mean that there's less wood going on the fire, so to speak, or coal going on for the fire.
Madam Chair, you're right. That's absolutely right. That's why the emissions, say the amount pumped up, and they are decreasing quite rapidly, but concentrations, you have to think of our atmosphere as a big chemical mixing box. It's very complicated. It relies on a lot of different factors. One of the things we're actually discussing at the moment is the fact that our maximum peaks in the evening, I think I showed most of you that plot, that 24-hour plot, may not be decreasing, but because we've had such sunny winters as well as slightly warmer winters the last few years, in the mornings in particular, we may not be lighting our wood burners. Maybe we are using our heat pumps for the morning and using our wood burners at night. That means that because these exceedances are over a 24-hour period, we may still be getting the same maximum amount of pollutants. But in the morning period, we may not be adding to that total over 24 hours. Partly because it's sunnier, partly because it's warmer, or maybe it's just because it's easier to turn on a heat pump in the morning if you're only there for an hour. So behaviour, but meteorology is a massive thing to do with it. And that's why a lot more work needs to be done to understand the full composition of it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's not just a single factor.
Quick question. Yes. Just in regards, obviously, Gore's using more coal than the car, but it's still, the makeup of the wood versus coal, but we're still getting the same reductions. Just to understand that when you think, well, if everybody's using more coal, it should be worse.
They have less burners from the data from these reports, it implies. I mean, we have to say that the data from this implies from questionnaires and census data. So we haven't been in to count the number of burners. So, you know, open fuel burners, and obviously they're now not allowed. So they are burning coal. You're right. You actually saw that 6 rather than 5 for Invercargill. Coal is dirtier in most aspects. It releases more tonnage of waste, and it also releases various other chemicals that are undesirable. I don't know why they burn more coal, to be honest with you. I don't know their behaviour or why they would actually do that. Maybe it's, yeah, I can't answer that question, to be honest. I don't really understand why, but it should be detrimental. We should say that the location of our monitoring station in Gore is on a main street and not in where all the residential houses are. So it is likely to be lower. And a newer report a couple of years ago done by Environment Southland, or commissioned by Environment Southland, did show that even though it is representative of Gore, it's not a peak home heating site. So even though it obviously is improving the air quality there, I would say, it's not because we're not getting exceedances doesn't mean that the air perhaps over a night wouldn't be exceeding that 50 in some location. So yeah, that's something just to bear in mind perhaps.
Councillor Evans, do you have a question? And then you.
Question, it was almost, I was saying, thank you very much, that's good information, it's great, and some of the measures you're including. One of the ones that I've noted over the last 6 years is the central government's Healthy Homes project that's been going on with improved insulation under homes and roofs and everything else. And that would hopefully be part of leading a not needing so much heating as well. And that's been a pretty good project to hopefully improve homes within New Zealand during the last 6 years as well.
I've got Councillor Rodway and then Councillor Pemberton and then me.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I see that this report is about air quality in Southland, but it's really about air quality in the towns and city and in the Invercargill and Gore and the air sheds. Now, there is an issue, I believe there's an issue, air quality in the very urban areas, especially in rural areas of Southland. Now, it might be right or it might be wrong, but it would be good if we could set up some monitoring stations in rural or semi-rural areas where because smoke from rubbish fires is, in my experience, is quite common in the winter time and the first time or during the winter. And it can be very similar health effects. But my question is, can we, or would you consider setting up air monitoring quality sites in areas outside of those issues where, so we might learn more about that?
Madam Chair, if I may speak to the question. Yes, absolutely. We tend to forget that the rest of Southland is a third airshed. It literally is, and indeed, it's we actually focus on the main airsheds because most people will be affected. But actually, this year we have monitoring, even though they're not rural, in Te Anau and Mataura. So we are monitoring PM10 and PM2.5 at 2 schools there over this winter period, just to see if there is an issue regarding levels in those particular areas. Regarding capacity for rural districts, there is a need for not just for air pollution and covering that, dusty roads and also nuisance dust, fires, as you say. There is a need to do more rural monitoring. We have some capacity in our instrumentation because often it's instruments related, the restrictions that we have to be able to set up fine power, etc., to be able to get out there. These are things that we are looking at and we are looking to address. So I'm writing your question.
Thanks, Councillor Pemberton.
Yeah, just the information with the fuel use for heating. Is there a history of trend that can overlay over top of the emissions?
Yeah, the amount burnt.
Yeah,
yeah.
might really go towards what Paul Evans is saying, around healthy homes, to think using less energy.
This is it, Madam Chair, sorry, Councillor. What this I was about to say to Councillor Evans as well is the fact one of the things that we forget is we've had our information going on how to burn as well. So it's not just the amount of wood, it's how to burn better. We have our Good Wood scheme and we have our website, which is actually, I think it's a major part of some of the effectiveness of this decrease isn't the fact that people might not be burning so much wood, they might be burning better. They know now that they should be looking after their wood, it's drier wood. We have the Good Wood scheme, so we are getting better wood to them. We do know the amount of wood, these reports do lean on the amount of wood being burnt, and it has decreased as people have switched to newer ultra low emission burners. They burn better, so they don't waste wood, they're not smouldering, you're using the whole wood. There's good value in doing that. So it does make a lot of sense, both economically as well as environmentally, to do that.
Thanks. Just a quick question from me regarding the Waka Kotahi investigations. Given that, that Happin's report put us on the front page of the paper when it came out, when are we expecting their on-year study to have been concluded?
Yes, they released, they've been delayed, I've heard, Madam Chair, to put in their their diffusion tubes, so little tubes that go around on lampposts, and they were every month they'll be swapped over for 12 months, and they will give us an indication of the spatial and amount of nitrogen dioxide across. I've heard that they're just putting them in now, so this time next year they should have the data. we could get monthly data. We don't have to wait until they've got all the data in. I think they'll probably, these tubes tend to be analysed over in the UK. So there is a slow process to get the information out, but I can ask and actually find out when we can get some of the data, the touch points. I've had some input into where they should go. NIWA is actually leading on their behalf, and good relations with NIWA, having worked for them. So we can actually get some of that information for you, hopefully prior to this time next year.
Right. Yeah, excellent, because it was quite controversial, and given that the data was quite dated anyway, we don't want another set of data that's dated.
Very heavily based on modelling.
Yeah, yeah. Great, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor, oh, thank you. Moved, Councillor Rodway, seconded Councillor McPhail. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Thanks, Nick, for your patience. Item 5. Regional Transport Committee. Speaking of Waikakotahi and the like, welcome Russell. Not sure whether everybody's met you, Russell. Has everybody met Russell? Russell Walks. Welcome, Russell. Take it away.
Thank you,
And Liz.
And yes, thanks for the opportunity of speaking to the committee. It is the first time that I've been here since the election. So this report is just designed as a summary of the activities of our Regional Transport Committee, or the combined Otago Southland Regional Transport Committee. It gives an indication of the work that the topics that they've been covering, and also into the South Island RTCG. So I'm sure that our representatives on the RTC have spoken to the council before on following their meetings, but any questions that you might have, I'm happy to have
Thanks, Russell. I'm sure you can. Thanks, Russell. Any questions? Councillor Rodway?
Just an observation on page 144, the table there of fatalities and injuries doesn't add up. 3 on the table for the highway and 5 roads and 1 passenger.
Can you find it for us? Recommend.
That's right.
Yeah, that's good. Read.
Maybe it was a. Oh,
Okay.
might have been a pet.
It comes direct off the National Transport
Any other questions?
Just obviously there's a few challenges at large and things. PPSs and government policy statements and things. So is that that's probably the main thing at the moment, just trying to get the information from the government a wee bit to progress things, and then a wee bit without being too political. So we're trying to do things.
Won't get political at all.
Never.
It's not my job. So the Regional Land Transport Plan review, the midterm review, is well underway, and the Regional Transport Committee have had a look at the draft on the end. So the next steps in that are include the program of works projects that our road controlling authorities, the territorial authorities, and state highways once included in the RLTP for funding. That is all governed by the government policy statement on land transport. And without being political, it would be fair to say that changing the transport minister on the day or 3 days before the GPS was due to be considered by Cabinet and released for consultation is probably not designed to assist progress. So we're sitting waiting now. There's a very small window for the release of that document to the sector for them to carry out a robust consultation on it and get it back to the government before the election. So just what's going to happen in that area right now. we will continue, or we are continuing on the basis that the direction of the GPS is not going to change significantly, and that that we will be able to in reasonably quick time include the projects in the funding section. It does rely on that document being released. So that, along with the government's VKT, or vehicle kilometre travel emissions reduction program, that's held up in the same area, and they were to be releasing the draft of the New Zealand as well. So we're waiting on all of those at the present time.
Thanks, Russell. Councillor Evans, your question.
Thank you, Russell. I'm not sure if this is the right place to mention it, or if I've even met you before. I think you, Elizabeth Tiana on the mayor group. No, that's. I was just going to ask regarding clearing and budget, that sort of stuff, whether that's the right format for this.
Something that can be taken back through the Regional Transport Committee, or if you would like me to make specific requests to the Transport Agency.
Just we did
and at any time.
I'm sure our representatives on that group will speak vociferously about that. Councillor Rodway.
Yeah, is it, I know the city council's doing quite a lot, there's been a lot of work out of Otara at the moment on a cycleway out there. Do the cities and towns have their own program to enhance cycleway and cycling in the cities? Is that part of your work?
It's a program that the City Council have undertaken, and it's funded through some of it is funded through the National Land Transport Fund, so that comes through the RLTP. Our RLTP is specifically written to encourage and to have territorial authorities to do that. And it's written so that in such a way that they should be able to source funding from for their work. Environment Southland, but as a regional councils don't qualify for funding from the National Land Transport Fund for cycleways, etc. So it's got to go through the team.
Someone like to move? Thanks, Councillor Morrison. Councillor Pimpton. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? All right, thank you. Thanks, Steve. We've done item 6, which takes us to item 7, water and land portfolio update. 125. Glad I put my sticky things on today.
All right. Not being sure, but just figuring out which one.
A bit of a tag team.
It's fine.
Through you, Chair, we can tag team. Happy to
Great, go for it.
happy to answer any questions. Happy to, as always, take as read. We obviously have a fair amount of work happening in the water and land space at the moment. We've got a couple of workshops that we've had over the past few weeks, months, so that's been summarised here, as well as non-agreement workshops that are coming. We hot in my inbox this morning is a decision from the court in relation to the hearing that we had on tranche 3, which relates to the Manapuri power scheme appeal points. So once I've actually opened it and had a look at it, I'll be able to brief you more quickly, but it's good to know that the judges making some progress. The only thing I'd just say on the appeals in relation to how matters are still before the court, the judge released a minute last week to give all parties notice that she was going to be retiring at the end of September, and within that minute noting that she is hopeful she'll be able to wrap up all the remaining points except for the High Court matters.
We've still got a date for the High Court hearing. Again,
March next year.
I can give you more specific details on those things once I have caught up on all of the court correspondence sitting in my inbox.
Excellent.
Through Chair, perhaps if I could just add with the freshwater farm plans, the team out engaging have given us a brief update. So there was the meeting with the Aquarima farmers and there will be a second one with them in early July. But one of the suggestions from that first meeting was around a starter pack to assist farmers to prepare their own farm plan, or assisted by a trusted advisor, and case studies and examples of farm plans for different property types and farming operations. And we've also got a stand at the South Island Dairy event next week, or a brief rather, and those meetings refer to referral professionals in industry are coming up as well, and some drop-in sessions in July open to the Aquarima community.
Councillor McFarlane, you have a question?
So I'm not going to mention farm things. But I'm going to mention appendix N. So is that indicating appendix N will be done earlier, or as of September, is everything's going to be sorted?
Everything is what she said in the minute will be all remaining appeal points will be resolved prior to her retiring. That's her best endeavours, I think, was how it was framed. So appendix N we're expecting decisions on soon.
So they could come out earlier.
Yeah.
Which would be helpful to us.
Yeah, so at the moment on the appendix N work, we're expecting a decision on that hearing that was a few weeks ago. There was outstanding matters on scope. So we're expecting that, and then we're expecting at the same time a decision on appendix N. We're not anticipating any further hearing time on appendix N or any further evidence or work. So fingers crossed as always.
Thank you. Almost good news. Any other questions?
I'll move another report.
Thank you, Councillor Rodway. Seconded Councillor Evans. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
It's carried. Thank you. Item 8. Strategy, science and engagement group. Blah, 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 no. And etc. is what I was trying to say, but it came out very badly. I'm sorry. Please take it away.
So the front part of the report's predominantly on the resource management reforms, so that might be one, Lucy, actually for you to cover off first.
So anticipating the select committee for next week on the 27th of June, just had the local government one that arrived as we were anticipating it this week. Lots of work happening in the background in terms of the establishment of the local government implementation group, the LGIG, we do like an acronym, and that group is intended to support the transition through bills. There's a couple of links there for some latest speeches as well, and also the latest intel that we've got in terms of the national planning framework and time frames associated with that. We talked a little in the update about first tranche regions. Since then, members of staff took a briefing to the mayoral forum, and there wasn't cross-regional support for us to be considered as a first tranche region, so we won't be. We will have everybody on the same page for that. So that's one thing I could tick off my list. But also we did get a steer that there is a desire for us to advance with, as we have been preparing for spatial planning to be done more jointly together with the TAs and with Te Awanama. So that will continue regardless of the actual new legislation coming or not. We, on stock exclusion, we've had some consultation happening, a webinar being set up in the next couple of weeks. So we'll be able to come back again when we've got a bit more detail about what that actually looks like. It relates to the slope map. That will be very familiar to yourselves. Yeah, so that's that first part.
Yes, and just from a regional perspective, I think the committee will be aware, but the Beyond 2025 Southland work that has been underway is due to be finalised this month, but you understand the documents at printers at the moment. So
yeah, and then launch for that is on Wednesday. Wednesday, I think. Yeah.
The only other thing I would point to in terms of the work programme is we're hoping that we'll be able to do a bit of a show and tell at some point to the committee with the hazard portal that's been in development. So it's being beta tested at the moment by staff internally, is to make sure there's no gremlins. But once we've got that, any gremlins ironed out, we'll be able to show the committee as well as obviously with the testing out.
Question, councillor Morrison?
Actually, on that hazard thing.
Getting late.
I'm really curious. I'm really looking forward to the demo. And I guess thinking from a climate change perspective, is it going to have utility in terms of projecting or modelling for what? So hazards today, not hazards tomorrow.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a summation of information that we currently use to answer people's inquiries about what hazards their area or properties they might be looking at. So it's a shift for us in terms of making it much more self-service for the community, so that they are able to access all of the information, or as much information as we've got available, for them to be able to kind of self-determine where there are hazards. So yeah, it's a process that's been on the board for a little while, but it's not a model forward. We do have a lot of ability to be able to do that, and certainly now more so with LiDAR coming on board. But it's going to be a key point of working with LiDAR as well as on these.
Thanks, Lucy. Councillor Broadway.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Stock exclusion policy takes effect on the 1st of July. This doesn't apply to sheep as far as I can tell, is that right?
Fast answer is yes, but there are some exceptions.
Okay, it applies mainly to cattle and deer.
Yeah.
So who's going to monitor this?
We would, as part of our monitoring enforcement as per and also as well as
specific new work program to do it, but it must be part of normal work. Okay, thanks.
And the rules that sit within that will have to be updated as per the NES runs out. The NES expires, obviously, so there's elements that are connected in terms of the stock exclusion regulations, as well as the National Environmental Standard, as well as the NCS for fresh water. So when we do plan change to Etahi, all of those things need to be pulled together in a seamless way. So
Awesome. Just two quick things from me. Anka knows what I'm going to say. The Clean Air Loan Scheme review. Keep on keeping on. Let's get that moving. And I really like this page, Lucy.
yeah.
I just wanted to congratulate you on producing that page of page 136. There are no current relevant initiatives open for consultation for us. Yeah, so I think perhaps that's the first time I've seen that for quite some time. Anyway, somebody like to move that report if there are no further questions. Thank you, Councillor McPhail, Councillor Pemberton. All those in favour, please say aye. Against. Carried. Thank you. Right, we have done item 9. We have done item 1. There is no extraordinary or urgent business that I'm aware of. Might be living dangerously if you raised some at this point.